Welcome to a debate edition of the Whatever podcast. We're coming to you live from Santa Barbara, California. I'm your host and moderator, Brian Atlas. A few quick announcements before the show begins. This podcast is viewer supported, so please consider sending a tip through streamlabs.com/whatever. To display a message on stream is $10 and up via Streamlabs or Superchat. We will be taking viewer questions or comments. We will read via Streamlabs tips and super chats that are $99 and up in batches during breaks. You can see the description for full details. Without further ado, I'm joined today by Trent Horn. Trent earned master's degrees in the fields of theology, philosophy, and bioethics. And he's the author of 9 books. Are you working on 10th or?
I actually think now it's hard to keep track. They're like kids. How many do I have? I think I might be over 12 now. It'd be nice to get to a point where I can say more than a dozen and just let it be. But yeah, I'm writing a few different ones right now and having a lot of fun with that.
Okay, great. Also joining us today is Kyla, or as she goes online, not so erudite. She has an undergraduate in psychology and a graduate diploma in psychometrics. She's a content creator, streamer, and a political and social commentator. You both have about a 3-minute opening statement, and then we are going to get right into open conversation. Trent, you go first.
All righty. So we're talking about Christian nationalism today, a lot of things under that umbrella. And the problem with talking about Christian nationalism is that nobody can agree on what it means. The critics of the idea often define it as like Handmaid's Tale fever dreams of religious leaders directly controlling the government and instituting evil policies like turning women into slaves. And defenders of the idea exist across a wide spectrum, with probably a few crazy people in the mix. But the most prominent defenders of Christian nationalism put forward a fairly reasonable definition of it. Stephen Wolfe defines it as a totality of national action consisting of civil laws and social customs conducted by a Christian nation as a Christian nation in order to procure for itself both earthly and heavenly good in Christ. Andrew Torba says it is a spiritual, political, and cultural movement comprised of Christians who are working to build a parallel Christian society grounded in a biblical worldview. As a Catholic, I agree with these goals, though I would lean more towards Catholic integralism, which would root authority on moral matters in the Catholic Church's teaching than just amorphous principles. Though I also lean towards libertarianism, so I'd want a kind of limited Christian government that still respects the rights of all people. Does that mean I want a theocracy that oppresses other religions? Not at all. The Second Vatican Council taught that religious freedom, quote, has to do with immunity from coercion in civil society. Therefore, it leaves untouched traditional Catholic doctrine on the moral duty of men and societies toward the true religion and toward the one Church of Christ. When Pope Leo recently visited the European nation of Monaco this year, he said the following to them: "You are among the few countries in the world to have the Catholic faith as a state religion. This faith places us before the sovereignty of Jesus, who calls Christians to become in the world a kingdom of brothers and sisters, a presence that does not cast down but raises up, that does not separate but connects, always ready to protect every human life with love at any time and in any condition, so that no one is ever excluded from the table of fraternity." So what kind of Christian state would I want to live in? How about one where it's illegal to dismember babies in the womb, or create them in labs and sell them even to unmarried men through commercial surrogacy? A state where sperm donors don't father thousands of children who will never know their father? Where porn that destroys children's minds and their families is basically illegal, especially AI content involving people, who are not adults. So even when some judges say that should be protected under the First Amendment. Above all, it's a state where the highest value is not liberty, but the good itself, God. Now, we might disagree about where to draw the line between outlawing evil and merely using social customs to shame evil, but we should agree society is better if our goal for people is to live good lives and not merely pleasurable lives. So here's a simple argument that I would propose. There's 3 premises and a conclusion. Number 1, all laws are based on ethical systems. Number 2, some ethical systems are better than other systems. And number 3, Christian ethical systems are better than secular systems. So laws should be based on Christian ethical systems. I think 1 and 2 are obvious. We might disagree about number 3. But I would say that this premise is true because Christianity provides the best explanation for why there are any moral obligations at all, why all human beings have equal dignity, and it produces the best outcome for avoiding grave and debaucherous evils that harm men, women, and especially children. So there you go.
Cool.
All right, Kyla, your opening statement, please.
Yes, and I apologize for reading it off of my phone. Okay. So I think the best arguments for separation of church and state within America were penned by the founding father of the Constitution and known Christian, James Madison. I'm mostly going to be borrowing from his argument in Memorial and Remonstrance. This is from James Madison. I'm adding these 2 words. Christian nationalism, as we see it today in America, violates that equality which ought to be the basis of every law which is indispensable, in proportion as the validity or expediency of any law is more liable to be impeached. If all men are by nature equally free and independent, all men are to be considered as entering into society on equal conditions, as relinquishing no more and therefore retaining no less, other than another, of their natural rights. Above all, they are to be considered as retaining an equal title to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience. Whilst we assert for ourselves freedom to embrace, to profess, and to observe the religion which we believe to be of divine origin, we cannot deny an equal freedom to those minds who have not yet yielded to the evidence which has convinced us. If this freedom be abused, it is an offense against God, not against man. To God, therefore, not to man, must an account of it be rendered. Are the liberal Christians the only sects who think a compulsive support of the religion unnecessary and unwarrantable? Can liberal Christians' piety alone be entrusted with the care of public worship? Christianity does not need legal protection or support to exist more than any other religion. To say that it is a contradiction to the Christian religion itself. For every page of it disavows a dependence on the powers of this world. It is a contradiction to fact, for it is known that this religion both existed and flourished, not only without the support of human laws, but in spite of every opposition from them, and not only during the period of miraculous aid, but long after it had been left to its own evidence and the ordinary care of providence. Nay, it is a contradiction in terms, for a religion not invented by human policy must have pre-existed and been supported before it was established by human policy. It is moreover to weaken in those who profess this religion as pious confidence in its innate excellence and the patronage of its author, and to foster in those who still reject it a suspicion that its friends are too conscious of its fallacies to trust its own merits. In the words of Paul toward the Corinthians, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty.
All right.
All right. Thank you both for your opening statements. Well, feel free to just jump on in.
I guess we can do that. I'm interested to see where we agree and where we disagree. Because
I think we agree in a lot of spots, I would guess.
Yeah.
I suspect.
Because it sounds like I'm trying to understand your big concern with whatever is called Christian nationalism, that it's just going to oppress people or impose moral burdens on them or standards on them that's unjust to impose on them. Mm-hmm. Is that your basic concern?
So my main concern, I'm going to focus on American Christian nationalism, because I would probably grant there's a logically possible Christian nationalist movement that I might be fully for. But in America, I know how I feel very distinctly about that.
Yeah, because I gave an example of there are countries where Catholicism is a state religion, like Monaco. Malta is basically like a Catholic country.
Sure, yeah.
I like that. I think it's, but America, you feel different.
Yes. In America, I think that theocracy is going to be an inevitable conclusion of American Christian nationalism, and they mostly lay this at the feet of evangelical Protestantism. I think that it is a very... We can get into it. I'll stay there. Well, I lay it largely at the feet, but broadly, because Christians are more than just Protestants, I think the movement of American Christian nationalism is leading to the inevitable conclusion of a robbing of rights.
What kind of rights do you think would be robbed? That you're most worried about?
I would be worried about people's freedom of association, freedom of religion.
Can you give me specific examples? Like they would lose the ability to do this particular thing.
Not particularly, because I can't future predict I can't say this is exactly what U.S. American Christian nationalists would do. I can say like what they talk about, but
like you would lose the right to do X.
I would be concerned about greater pressure, for example, to teach Christianity in public schools. I'd be concerned about tests being greater insisted upon, or Christian identity for our politicians. I would be concerned increasingly about a Christian insistence on policy based exclusively on the Bible, not policy based on the good of the nation. I would be concerned about it corrupting the political leaders itself. I think James Madison raises this. Actually, my biggest and first and foremost issue with Christian nationalism is I think it corrupts the religion. I think it's really bad for the religion. But secondary to that is I think it's bad for the state.
Well, I don't necessarily even disagree with you about the religion. I've seen state-sponsored churches where they fall apart, they rest in their laurels, they just take tax money from the state and they atrophy.
Russian Orthodox Church is in a really dismal place right now because of
German Catholic Church has the same problem.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, in Germany there is a tax where your tithes are mandatorily given to the religion you go to. So
that's what James Madison was actually speaking specifically about.
And that's a policy that I disagree with.
Yeah. So that would be a type of policy that I think, we see early on James Madison fighting against Christian nationalists who want to do this thing. And so where could Christian nationalism go? I don't know. I'm not going to say it will necessarily be Handmaid's Tale.
But here's the way that I look at it, though, that eventually you are going to have to impose something on people, including things that they think are their religious freedoms. So my concern is that there's no such thing as true state neutrality on several issues. I will give you two examples. So the state cannot be neutral on the question of who is a person with a right to life. Or
what do you mean by neutrality? Do you mean like moral neutrality, or like
moral,
or like
moral and legal?
Like
as
they
in the
can't
state
be agnostic?
the state doesn't talk about that issue. So for example, which religion is true? Like in America, the state is neutral on that. Right. Like the state doesn't tell us which religion is true, but the state does tell us who is and isn't a legal person. So one example would be who is a person, and another example would be what is marriage. The state can't be neutral on those. So some value system is going to be imposed. And so I think that if secular liberalism can be imposed, we can critique it. And if there's something better, we should impose that. And I think Christian ethics are going to be better there. So I'll give you an example. So in the 19th century, there was a Supreme Court case called Reynolds versus the United States. It dealt with Mormon polygamy. Do the Mormons, it's their religion. The guy can have as many, wives as he wants, I guess. Should they be allowed to have multiple wives because that's their religion? Can we impose our laws on them? And in Reynolds, the Supreme Court said that if religious liberty means you can do whatever you want because your religion says so, the law would exist in name only. I mean, think about, if you had people who are like, well, I'm going to be an Aztec. I'm going to sacrifice my children for the corn crops this year. So would you agree? We're always going to be limiting people's sincerely held beliefs.
To some degree, yeah, that's the nature of a state.
Okay.
My question to you would be, what do you think would happen with Christian nationalism? Do you think that Christian nationalism in America today, if Christian nationalists had what they want, do you think that it would look like the America James Madison was envisioning, or that Americans are thinking about? What do you think it would look like?
Well, I think it'd probably look a lot different because people wouldn't be enslaved. That would be nice. It would be a lot different.
What do you mean by that?
Well, like in the time of James Madison, there was a large portion of the United States population that were enslaved. They didn't have a right to liberty.
I don't think Christian nationalists would roll back that, for example. I agree.
But there were people who were arguing for and against slavery with religious arguments for and against, and so the state can't be neutral on that question. I think to answer your question, though, what's hard is, like I said in my opening, Christian nationalism is just such a broad thing as to what it is doing. I think on the far end, where you try to get the church to replace the state, I think things would go poorly. And that would be theocracy. So theocracy is when the state is directly controlled by religious leaders. Yeah. That might be popular amongst some Christian nationalists, but I don't even think very many of them.
Well, theocracy is two things. It's when it's run by religious leaders, but also in the definition is that the legal system is based on religious law. And I do see Christian nationalists, for example. So
there's where I would draw a hard line, that I would consider that more like Catholic integralism or Christian nationalism in the sense that we have to have some kind of way to judge our laws to make sure they're just. And we might use Christian principles to do that.
Sure. My argument to this would be you shouldn't use only Christian principles if you're a statesman, right? So I have kind of two prongs of why Christian nationalism in America is concerning. One,
Okay.
I think the inevitable conclusion of current American Protestant evangelicalism is theocracy. I think actually a lot of Christians, I think just recently they said they think that Trump is the second coming, and they actually are okay with him being the king. Like there's many Christian nationalists that are Protestants that are just
I would
okay
be the
with
best
that.
king that you ever had.
Yeah.
So much better than those other kings.
But terrifying because it's not just
Even
like,
better than that King George.
Yeah, it's not just like small time people. There was large Christian speakers on stages. I was watching, I can't remember his name. He's got this blonde, golden, beautiful hair, and he wears glasses. He was talking to a stage of thousands of people watching, talking about how he wants Trump to be the king, right? And so I think that's really concerning because you and I can agree theocracies are bad, not good, okay? But the second thing is I actually think that Christians ought not make moral compromises. And I think political leaders must a lot of the time. And having a state in which, for example, well, you have to basically be a Christian to lead. I have very huge concerns about that because I think that there are many choices that certain political leaders will need to make for the goodness of their state to be a good leader of the state that maybe a Christian ought not make. And that would be a huge concern as well, is that I don't think that it leads to, a good system.
Well, okay, so I have two thoughts on that. First, I think that Christians should absolutely be involved in politics. I wouldn't
Didn't say that I...
Right.
Is that a rebuttal to me?
Yeah, were you concerned about Christians being involved in politics?
Nope.
Then what was your...
I said Christians ought not make moral compromises, but political leaders must.
Right, but that sounds like if you're a Christian political leader, you're going to have to make compromises.
Probably, yeah.
So if you don't want them doing that, it sounds like you're saying you don't want Christian leaders in politics.
No, I think they can be in politics. I think it's really hard. I think, frankly, it's really hard. And so is there, like, can I imagine a world where you've got kind of a senator, he doesn't get involved in everything, he focuses a lot of his policy and bill making on only the things that are aligned with his Christian ethics and stuff like that, and that's about it. And he uses logic and reason and compelling to get the votes for it. I think that that's actually fine. I have no problem with that.
Why can't he just vote for the things that don't contradict his moral principles? And then he works against the other things. I don't think it has to be that limited. So I'll give you an example. In John Paul II's Gospel of Life, he wrote an encyclical on abortion and other offenses against human life. In paragraph 73, he talked about what do you do if you are a politician who is against abortion, you want to ban abortion, but you can't fully ban it. So could you vote for limited laws? Like, let's say, we're going to just ban abortion for birth control, but leave it for the hard cases. Mm-hmm. Can you, as a faithful Catholic, do that? And so what the Pope said is, yes, as long as people know you're personally opposed and your goal in the law is to limit evil, not expand it. Because politics is the art of the possible.
Sure.
Sometimes you don't have enough political capital to get everything you want.
I think a valid critique of that would be going, well, you're still necessarily enabling to some degree the poor behavior. Well, because you're compromising on it a little bit. You're still allowing it somewhat in edgewise.
But that's like saying if there was 100 drowning children and I only have the resources to save 90 of them, I shouldn't save the 90 because I'm somehow complicit in the other 10.
I don't want the other. Analogous. It would be more like you have, in order to save 90 children, you might have to like shoot one in the head, right? That would be more of like the type of compromise situation.
No, it isn't, because...
Or you have to let somebody torture that child a little bit, right? And it's like, I want the political leader to make the choice to torture the child a little bit. I think the Christian gets very, very stuck.
I'll make a better analogy. So it'd be like there are 100 children drowning, and 90 of them are being drowned by super skinny, scrawny guys. And so I can easily beat them up and save those kids. The other 10 are 300-pound jiu-jitsu black belts. So it's like, I know some jiu-jitsu, not enough to beat a...
You'll be fine.
Not enough to beat a 300... I'm only a blue belt. Not enough for a 300-pound black belt. So it's like, I'm not letting that... So when I choose to intervene to save some of the kids and stop the people killing some of them, the others, I'm not letting them It's just, I don't have the power to stop them yet, but I hope one day I will.
Sure,
Much the same
but
with
I would
abortion.
say to that in that instance, I think
I
it
don't have
would
the
be,
power to save all the babies, but I hope one day I will.
But perhaps the Christian argument would be, maybe in this situation, you should throw yourself at them anyways, because it would be the right thing to do, to try to save them, even if you'll fail, because the glory is the kingdom of God. It's not just the outcomes, right? And I think so I think
But
what
if
you're saying
letting
is
them
reasonable.
beat me up so the other 90 kids die anyways,
It's not
then
rational.
But I want to be rational and save as many as I can without doing evil.
Sure.
And I'm not doing evil by just recognizing I don't have the power to stop these other people yet.
Sure.
But
And
here's the other thing I want to bring up about theocracy. What I also worry about from your critique,
Yeah.
this is just a critique of any value system.
No.
Because secular liberalism will always try to make the president a king to do what they want. I mean, people treat Trump like a king. People also did the same with Obama or Biden. Maybe not as gold, fancy, and flourish, but they'd want them to just put in as many policies as possible that they support. That's everybody gets that way.
Sure, I think that like selfish voters typically just want what they're self-interested in to have. But I think like the founding fathers are Christians and deists who made the nation, who were very intentional about building separation of church and state. And I think there's a lot of people, secular and Christian, who recognize the values of these things, right? And so I don't think that this is a critique of like the secular system necessarily. What I'm saying here specifically is that like Christians shouldn't make moral compromises, and necessarily political leaders must. And I think like the example you give is a good one, because I would agree, as a leader, you should make the rational choice to not throw yourself at the 10 men that can kill you. I think that that's totally fine. Or throw your nation at
because
it.
of that, it will stop me from saving the other 90.
Sure.
I just can't fight them yet, but one
I
day
think
I
there's
will.
a completely valid Christian argument, as if you were just an individual, to say maybe you should try to save the 90 and then throw yourself at the 10.
I would agree with that. And so, for example, a Christian
but a leader,
a
I don't
Christian,
want them to do that.
But
right?
a Christian would be justified, for example, and we can bring it back to abortion, and I want to talk about that because it's a nice concrete case of a disagreement we would have. That I would say a Christian is within their right to vote for a total ban on abortion, except maybe to
voters. I'm not really talking. Voters can do
or a
whatever they want.
politician. He tries to
Let's
pass it.
Talk about leaders.
Go for it. Odds are
Sure.
it's not going to pass.
I agree.
But I believe the other politician says, hey, I could ban abortion just for birth control. I have the votes to get that tomorrow. I think he's also within his rights to propose that it will save children, and it's not evil for him to do that.
So I suspect that there's a misunderstanding of my position, which is my fault because I probably didn't make it clear. What I am not saying is that Christians shouldn't be in office. And what I'm not saying is that Christians don't have logical reasons for why they might compromise on certain things that they think is for the greater good. I think all of that is totally sound. What I am saying is that if we are insisting that our leaders are Christian, necessarily there's going to become a point in these political leaders' lives where there is going to be compromise, where they allow, for example, the building of a mosque in their city, even though they think that that mosque might be effective at converting people to a religion that's not Christianity, which to the political leader would say, you're necessarily, to some degree, allowing somebody who's damning people to hell, theoretically, in your city, and also to evangelize, damning more people to hell. A political leader goes, well, we have religious freedoms for a reason, so I have to stand by that. Where a religious leader, I think, has a little bit more compromise, and understandably so, a little bit more difficulty here. And so what I'm talking about for policymakers, Christians can be policy leaders. Of course they can. And of course they can use their Christian ethics for why they believe what they believe. What they can't do is, and I'll read it just because I wrote it down so it's really simple.
Okay.
Whatever policy they want can come from only reason X, being religion. That's fine. But you need to justify it with practical logic and reason. So a Christian politician, and I think you actually do this a lot, you don't say abortion's bad because God said so, even though fundamentally that's going to be your predilection, right? That's fundamentally why you think abortion is bad. You also have a bunch of practical, logical reasons as to why you think it's bad as well. And you use your voice and argumentation to sway people to your side, to get, if you were the political leader, the votes to your side. Totally fine with me. I have no problem with that. The problem that I have is that a lot of Christian leaders go, being gay is bad because God said so, And I don't really care about making any practical reasons and logic. I just think God doesn't like it. So I'm going to find a way to force this policy through, regardless of how voters, because I can't practically logic and reason them into it unless they share my faith.
Sure.
So I'm going to force it through by my faith alone, by my belief alone. That is the form of Christian nationalism that I think is common in the US and is a problem.
Okay. So I would say that I agree with you. Not everything that is immoral ought to be illegal. So some things I know are immoral through divine revelation. And so I'm not necessarily going to outlaw those things. But there are many things that are gravely immoral that we can know through divine revelation and through reason.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so because of that, Christian leaders can act. So I guess
Of course.
so I would say this is like, look, leaders should always do good, correct?
We'd probably fight on the word good. And which
Leaders should not make evil choices.
Political leaders we're talking
Political, yeah, sure. Political leaders, if they can choose between a good choice and an evil choice, they should make the good choice.
as much as possible, but fundamentally, they need to keep their nation state
All
alive.
other things being equal, yeah.
Well, yeah, but importantly here, say like you have this hypothetical where a leader has to choose between a grave evil of infinitely torturing a child in a room. But if he does so, it prevents his nation state from being nuked and destroyed. I actually want a political leader who makes that choice, even though as a Christian, I don't really want to doom any child to infinite torture.
Oh, goodness. Are you, is your ethical system just utilitarianism?
No, I'm a divine
But
command theorist.
You're what?
I'm a divine command theorist.
Where did God say it was okay to torture a child?
He didn't.
Infant?
That's why I said I don't want to make that choice. But I do. But as people, we want a political leader who makes that choice. Because otherwise, your preference is that your political leader just yields to the destruction and annihilation of your country. What if the thing that's threatening to destroy and annihilate your country is a country as well that we view as bad, right? We, of course, want our political leaders to choose our nation state succeeding. And I want them to make as many ethical choices as possible, all the time.
Any leader, regardless of their personal beliefs, they should not do evil so that good may come. And I think Christians are especially held to that standard.
What about lying?
That's a divine command right there.
What about lying?
That's a complex issue about what counts as a lie.
Okay, let's say it's an explicit known lie.
Okay.
If you need to lie to, for example, end something evil, and you have to lie to the people and you have to use propaganda to push it.
Okay.
Do we do that?
I would say it's similar to, there is a view of lying that says you can damage someone's beliefs, but only if you have a grave reason, just like you can damage their body only if you have a grave reason. So if you're having an allergic reaction, I can cut your trachea open, stick a tube in to save your life. But just if it's just more convenient for me to slash you up, I certainly can't do that. Much the same, there may be cases like in war, for example, you have to deceive the enemy, and so you're going to engage in deception and lying or spying or things like that. But I don't want our political leaders just lying to us like, oh, masks don't do anything, that way to save the supply of them and things like that. Because when leaders lie, they get found out. That erodes public trust.
Sure, we can talk about, again, practical logic and reason.
Hold on, I want to go back. Let
there.
me go back, because here's my big concern, that on a lot of these issues, I do feel like the other side, what you might call secular liberalism, it will end up basically imposing things that I would say are just another kind of religious view. The view that a person's right to life begins when they are born, I would say that is just a religious view that people hold. And so if you want to say that the value begins at conception, that's another religious view that I would say it's one that's much more backed by reason and logic.
It feels
and
like
so
when
it
you're
ought to
saying...
be, it ought to be, have a fair shake to be put into the law.
Yeah, it feels like when you're saying religious view, you're talking about a philosophical view, right? And so a secular person is going to have varying reasons for when they think personhood is conferred, whether it's through the birth canal, which I think is a very unsatisfying argument, but they're going to have satisfying, logical, rational arguments for whatever they believe, right? Consciousness.
No, not necessarily. They might, that are satisfying to them, but are not objectively satisfying.
Well, depends on what you mean by objective. Like if you want to you can go to the moral compass, but I'm not here to defend secularism, but you can probably grant me that secular people can make logical, rational arguments for when they think personhood is conferred. Even though you're right, personhood is a theoretical concept. It's not empirical. We can't really test for it. There's no button we can hit to go, bing, now you're a person. Just like there's no button you can hit to go, bing, now you're ensouled, right? Which is why the conservative approach from Christians is to go, well, we don't know when it's ensouled. So we're going to be as cautious as possible to make sure that we don't mess that up. But I would say again, if you have a Christian leader making policy by going, well, we don't want to do wrong, so we're going to go most conservative as possible, that's not really how the state works. It doesn't work that way. That's not how our current state works. And I think that's for good reason.
But that's not my preferred argument against abortion anyways. Why?
Sure, we don't need to get into abortion.
But I mean,
right now.
I think when we talk about Christian nationalists, this is a pet issue people bring up to say that they don't like it. And I'm like, this is one of the reasons Christian nationalism would be awesome if we say, okay,
abortion?
Political leaders who operate under Christian values will protect the right to life of every member of the human species and protect direct acts of killing innocent members of our community.
Can we just...
Abortion being one of them. So would it be permissible in your view of America if Christians use the democratic process to make abortion illegal, which they have in several states?
Depending on the process by which they're like, as long as they're supplying logic and reason for it, that's satisfactory. Like, I think the future like ours argument is a fine enough argument to make. But if people are not compelled by it and they reject it and they go for the consciousness argument, which I think is also a good logical argument, I think that that's how democracy works. I have no problem with Christians advocating for things, like I said, because of their Christian ethics at all. I have an issue when the reason why they insist it must be policy and the reason that they're pushing for policy only goes back to the Bible. Their only justification that they can find for it is, well, God said so. It's like, that's not how we work the state, and it should not be how we work the state. That's how the founding fathers thought of this, for good reason.
Well, then, do you think, then my further proposal would be that I think all people of goodwill, but especially all Christians, have a moral duty to use the political apparatus to protect unborn children from abortion.
No, not necessarily.
What is...
I mean, did Christians have a moral duty back when Rome was genociding Christians to overthrow Rome?
They had a duty to save children however they could.
Only children? Not adult Christians that are getting genocided too?
Well, the people who were being killed, there were adults who were being martyred, for example, and then there were children who were just being exposed in the wilderness and left for dead, and Christians went and they rescued them. But living under the ancient Roman Empire, where you do not have a democratic process to be able to change society, it's a lot different. What?
Should you try to overthrow Rome as a Christian?
Paul said no, because it would probably be a suicide mission and generate more harm.
I don't know if that's why Paul said no, though, right? I think it's a reasonable answer for you.
He said, in Romans 13, he says that the state authorities are placed by God.
Sure, exactly.
And they wield the sword. But I think the point there is that you can do good within that system, but once you get enough power, and here's the thing, I don't believe in sola scriptura. So I don't think that Christian moral principles are just whatever the Bible says, because now we have power. We have the ability to shape the state so it procures as many goods as possible. And one of those goods, so I would say, what's wrong with this argument? Every Christian has a moral obligation to vote to end slavery. If it were 150 years ago and there's a vote, you'd have a moral obligation to vote to end slavery. And today you have a moral obligation to vote to end legal abortion.
I think that
would you agree with both of those statements?
I would say both of these are completely sound arguments to make. Both of these are completely sound, and I think individual Christians should be utilizing exegesis and eisegesis to determine the way in which they ought to orient themselves. But this isn't commentary on whether or not the state should be a Christian nationalistic state in the way that I'm specifically describing, which is a state in which the laws are built on the back of saying, the Bible said so.
Sure.
That's the type of thing that I have huge issue for, and absolutely American Christian nationalism is going to. I just want to touch back.
But there's a
if I could just
spectrum.
touch back quickly, because we ran away from this. You keep on saying secular people are forcing a religious view on Christians. But I feel like what we're doing is we're kind of slipping the word religious in when we mean philosophical view, right? Most secular people are for freedom of religion. There are some anti-theists who are not for that. And I think anti-theists are cringe. And I think that their arguments are very unsatisfying, which is why most atheists don't agree with anti-theists on this. But most atheists, if you ask them, do you think that there should be freedom of state? They would say yes. And informed atheists would probably give you a logical argument for why they might harken back to Rawls, but they would have some sort of good logical argument within their own contextual framework of why they think that that is a good thing. And so I don't think that they're imposing
the
religion
reason
on
that I
us.
said secularism imposes a religion is because I think that for many people who are not religious, their base foundation for, why is this true or why is this right or wrong is because I feel that way. And so I think your concern is Christians will say, well, God told me so. But that's just a description over I feel that way for many people. So I think there's many secular people, they don't have God talk, but they use the same arbitrary foundation of I just feel like it's a baby when it's born, or I just feel that anybody who loves each other should be allowed to get married. And so there I would say, well, they're getting to put that into the law, and it has way less, because it's false.
Well,
it's not going to have reasons to support it like my view does.
Well, they haven't put it into law. They're fighting for it
Sure,
to be put into law in the same way that I think it's not, right? In fact, they're fighting for it in the same way that I'm saying Christians are allowed in democracy to fight for these laws. And I think that that's totally fine. I think also saying, well, I think a lot of people, they just come to their conclusion because I feel that way.
Yeah.
Sure, I would just grant most people on the planet are not overly thoughtful about their epistemological system. I'm sure you've got me.
That is 100%. That's 100% true.
Right? You and I could probably talk about Christians' obsession with gayness, but a large ignorance to gluttony, which is also a sin.
I think Christians are not obsessed with LGBT ideology. I think they are just responding to a culture that incessantly brings that fact up and dwells upon that.
Is a Christian more likely to kick out their child for the sin, according to their view, of being gay, or the sin of being obese?
Well, first, being obese is not a sin in and of itself. Some
pretty
people
good arguments for being a sin. Your
no,
body's a temple. All fat people in the Bible are viewed as
your physical. Okay, so obesity is a bodily condition. So your analogy would be more comparing the status of being overweight with the status of having same-sex attraction. And so those are just biological facts about someone. They're not behaviors.
Yeah.
So I would say most people I know would not kick out a kid just for the fact that he has same-sex attractions.
Yeah.
Now, if your child is engaging in sexual activity.
If your child is engaging in eating thousands of Twinkies despite you telling him not to, both biological behaviors.
Yeah, I think there's a difference, though, between, in one case, you are causing harm to yourself, but in another case,
and
you
society, because you're costing a lot.
Okay. All right. First, I don't think that parents should be throwing out their kids, kicking their kids out of the house unless they are a threat to other people within the house.
Sure.
So, for example, do you think parents should kick out a kid, maybe they're not doing Twinkies, but they're doing heroin?
I think it's complicated. So there is good evidence of when that barrier needs to be erected. So if you have toddlers in the house, for example, and you've got an adult particularly that's using heroin, typically you want them out, especially because heroin.
You give a toddler and the 16-year-old older brother is using heroin. That's a dangerous situation.
So I guess I'm backing this from clinical practice. I'm telling you what the clinical practice is that I think works, because I have a background as an addiction counselor. Typically when you're talking about a 16-year-old, right, if it's heroin, usually there's criminological elements, which is why there's going to be reason. But typically you don't kick them out of the house. Usually you find them rehab placements, and the parents aren't saying you're not part of our life.
Send them to conversion therapy.
Well, I would argue
for their drug use.
Well, the issue is that rehab works for addiction. Conversion therapy didn't work for being gay.
I think if you have a teenager who is going out and having intercourse with 50 people a week, could be same sex, could be opposite sex, I don't care.
I probably wouldn't kick that child out. I'd probably be talking to that child about safety.
Okay, yeah. And
at least.
But I think you're going to be policing their behavior, one, primarily because they're engaged in evils, so the evils are going to have a negative effect on them, their soul and their bodies, and a negative effect on the other people they're engaging in that behavior with. It could get people pregnant, it could cause abortions.
Do you think I'm opposed to parents policing their children's behavior in their home?
I don't think so.
Take a reasonable guess. Anything I present. Do you think that I'm the type of person?
I think we just disagree on the line about when a kid should get kicked out or removed.
Kicking out. Because I think kicking out, I mean a very specific thing, right? I mean, you cutting them off. Okay. I'm thinking of my friend Stacey K. She just made a post about this recently. She's trans. She was kicked out. Her parents will not talk to her anymore. I have several friends of being gay. They won't. She's not welcome in their home, no matter what's going on. They will not interface with her whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Whereas the child with addiction, what we're talking about of the kicking out, what we're actually talking about is sending them to a rehab center where the parents are probably visiting all the time. They're probably totally welcome home for holidays. They understand the necessity of placing this heroin addicted child in rehab to get them better, but they usually do it sadly. It's not something that they're delighted to do, and they are constantly doing everything that they can to remind the child, you are still part of the family. Whereas in the gay instance, when I'm saying kicking out, it's obvious that they're saying, you're not part of this. It's a disownment.
Okay. I don't think this is that unique, though, to what we're originally talking about, which is the idea of a nation being ordered towards Christian moral principles.
Well,
We're just disagreeing. We just disagree about some of those principles, about when is sex moral or immoral.
Well,
we agree. Would you agree immoral sex ought to be shamed at the least and outlawed at the most?
So immoral sex, I'll just write that down. I will put a pin in it because I will answer that question. But before we go there, the reason that we're talking about this is an accusation that you made against secular ethics is that people just operate on because I feel that way. And I said, well, Christians operate a lot really similarly in that they, for example, would kick out a child who's gay, but not kick out a child who's gluttonous, even though they might acknowledge that the biological behavior of their condition is driving the behavior. And I think that that is the type of like silly epistemic looseness that Christians had, just as comparable to secular.
I would agree with you that it's a double standard if you're going to kick out someone for engaging in sodomy, but not fornication. I consider they're both sexual evils that are grave. But gluttony is just, it's bad, but is not as bad as misusing sex because sex is so important, sacred,
all sins
powerful.
are equal before the eyes of the Lord.
No, that's not true.
I guess you're Catholic.
That is absolutely not true. What you were thinking about is that is a common thing that many Protestants will say. All sin is equal in the sense that it makes us disqualified from entering into heaven.
Right.
But it
just
is
like
not
being gay disqualifies you, or as being gluttonous disqualifies you.
Not possessing the sanctifying grace of God in the soul makes it impossible for you of your own human merits to even desire God in heaven. You just wouldn't in your human nature. So all sin disqualifies you of heaven in that sense. But it is clear there are some sins that are more grave than others. Jesus himself talked about people who would relax the least of these laws, being the least in the kingdom of heaven. So even Jesus ranked the moral laws. It's very just obvious that some sins are graver than other sins. And at least, yes, from a Catholic tradition, we've had that for 2,000 years. We have that
would
down.
Reject that.
Some would. Some evangelicals would. A lot of other Protestants would agree with what I said.
So I would agree with what you actually said, that not all sins are equal necessarily.
Okay.
The issue is that, first of all, when we're talking about these two types of sin of who you kick out, the idea that you kick out the gay kid, I imagine there's other major serious carnal sins that you would agree parents shouldn't be kicking their child out for.
I think removing a child is always something of a last resort. I have 3 kids. If they're doing something really bad, that's good.
Would you disown a gay kid?
No, I'm not going to disown any of my kids, but I'm going to make sure they get their help.
Sure.
But where we disagree is I do think, if you're going to say, why do Christians make such a big deal about LGBT stuff? Well, it's a negative. There are negative aspects of this lifestyle. For example, men who engage in sexual relations with other men, they have a 2,000% greater chance of getting anal cancer, for example.
What's more harmful to a body, being fat or being gay?
It depends what you do. I don't know. Anal cancer is probably really, really bad. Being fat is not great.
What's the likelihood
either.
of getting anal cancer? Because women can engage in anal sex.
But they don't do it to the extent that men and other men do.
Sure, but A, what's the likelihood? And B, obviously being fat is harder on your body than being gay. Which is just obviously true.
Sure, I agree that being overweight, that it is a bad thing. That's why I believe that there is a moral obligation to live a healthy lifestyle and not abuse your body. So I agree. I don't disagree with that, but I do think it's a lot different than engaging in fornication, sodomy, those kinds of things. Because those are individual acts. The problem is weight is something that's a byproduct of something we have to do, eating. Whereas sexual behaviors, we can purposely engage in them. It's a lot different from just a byproduct of eating.
I don't think anyone would reasonably argue that you must eat Twinkies. I think you could actually go your whole life never eating cake and Twinkies and be fine.
Sure, but you have to eat something. You have to eat something to live. You don't have to have sex to live.
Sure. Yeah, it's not a fundamental thing. But to go back, the reason why this is coming
up then I want to return some of my stuff too. So.
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to run away. The thing is that we keep kind of moving away from the point that I'm driving here, which is that your criticism of secular ethics is saying, well, they're just being kind of unthoughtful emotivists, basically. There's no epistemological system. There's no thought process or logic or reason going here. And I would say Christians too. There are very thoughtful, very rational, reasonable Christians like yourself.
And that's why I would say when you're comparing ethical systems, you should compare best to best. So I would be fine comparing even the best secular ethical systems to the best Christian systems. And I've been on this show many times. Yeah, I'd say many by now, and in other debate formats where when I press my interlocutor to defend their secular moral principle, it leads to stuff that's so gross. Brian told me not to say it, so the channel wouldn't get striked. So
sure,
that makes me
I know the person
and that makes me very. It's happened multiple times.
Sure,
and so that makes me very suspicious that that's an ethical system I want behind our laws.
But you have to contend with the fact that Andrew Wilson is on your side, and you have to deal with the fact that you have a Christian.
He doesn't want me on any side.
Well,
with
the
him.
issue is that also lead to really terrifying things,
like
right?
What?
The Crusades were done along Christian law and principle, and we might say some of the Crusades were okay.
Started it.
The third and fourth Crusade, not good.
Of course, yeah. There's going to be abuses.
Of course, but this is
it's
the issue.
elements within there, but. Using war. I mean, I love in the Catholic tradition that
chosen war for mostly gold plundering in the case of the Third and Fourth Crusade.
No,
that is what
I would recommend that our listeners. Thomas Madden has a very good book, The History of the Crusades. Steve Weidenkopf has a book called The Glory of the Crusades. There's a lot that people remember of being the small minority of bad actors using things to their advantage to enrich themselves, but many other people doing things like liberating the Holy Land from Muslim occupation so that Christians like you and I can go there. Because it stinks when I go to the Chapel of the Ascension in Jerusalem. It's controlled by a Muslim trust. We can't even say Mass there.
So I guess there's two things. Yeah, I don't pray to a rock. And so actually wars done by Christians to fight over land after the veil was torn, I have very complicated feelings around, but no one would grant you that the Fourth Crusade or the Third Crusade were morally good. What essentially happened was a number of knights were going on a Third Crusade. They basically didn't have the funding to go where they wanted to go beat up Muslims, so they just went to a Christian nation and plundered it.
But here's the difference, though, that when Christians do evil, there is a standard we can identify where they've fallen short. Because I can talk about secularism, where Marxist states like the Soviet Union, North Korea, others that believe that atheism is the best for human flourishing, have implemented horrible atrocities against people. But there's no standard of there's a standard of being a morally good Christian, but atheism is just the negation of God. There's no objective standard for a morally good atheist. That runs the gamut.
There's some atheists that believe in natural law. So there are some people who believe in moral objectivity.
And I believe that they have identified something that ultimately has a Christian foundation. But they don't fully explain that.
Here's the issue, Trent. I do too.
Okay.
Because I'm a Christian ethicist. I'm a divine command theorist. The issue is what I don't do when I talk to secular people, or what I think is very lazy to do, is to out of hand dismiss secularism because it might be a subjective type of system. I think that that's intellectually lazy, because obviously there are contextualist or coherentist systems that are logically reasonable. Yes, they end at circularity, just like we end at dogma. However, are robust, they're logical, you can track them all the way through, they can lead to good. Aristotle led to a lot of principles. I basically call him Jesus before Jesus.
But I would say that's a theistic system ultimately grounded in something he calls the prime mover.
Virtue ethics is not a theist system. It's just not.
I think when you reach the ultimate end to see where virtue lies.
I see God in it because I think that God put in every human being a desire towards his goodness.
Okay.
And I think whether you watch Christian ethics or other ethics, there is a trundling towards that. I just think Christian ethics are the best of it. But we can acknowledge...
But that's something I said earlier. Yeah, Christian ethical principles, they're the best system. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. Of course I agree with that. The issue is a Christian ethical system, for example, doesn't insist on political power. It actually doesn't.
No, I don't.
Of course not. Otherwise, why would Paul say, render unto Caesar, while Caesar is murdering Christian babies? Why would he say this?
Are you talking about when Jesus said, give to Caesar what is Caesar?
Yeah,
and
or
give to
Paul
God's what is
said to
God's?
honor the authority.
Well, yeah. Paul, he does say that, but we have to also remember in the book of Acts, when Peter and John are brought before the Sanhedrin, which basically had political authority over the apostles, and they said, we told you not to preach the name of Jesus. And what Peter and the apostles said to them, they said, we must obey God rather than men.
Of course, if your state insists on you doing something wrong, right? If our state made a law that said not only is abortion legal, but you, Trent, have to get one if you're under the age of 24, like some crazy state. Of course, yeah, Christians should resist against that. A state should not compel you necessarily to personally act in sin. But that's a very big difference between making policy and law that is only justified by the Bible and telling, importantly, non-Christians that they must comply to that as well. That's my concern.
What I would say, though, is you're right. If it only relies on the Bible, I think that is not a sufficient way of arguing in a pluralist society. But I want you to agree with me that I would say Christians have a moral duty to rid the world of unjust laws.
I don't know. I haven't thought about that before. Do Christians have
That's a huge... Well, let's think it through. Christians have a moral duty to rid the world of unjust laws.
Probably, yeah. But unjust is going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Of course.
Because I think I certainly operate in this way, right? I do my best to be pretty loud and political about things that I think are unjust and wrong, but also about things that are empirical.
So, for example...
But I just don't know if I'd confer that to all Christians, but sure. For the sake of this conversation, I just will.
So, for example, the civil rights movement. So, what would it be now? It would be about 70 years ago in Alabama in the South. You have the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. Yeah. That was the movement working to end legal racial segregation in public accommodations. Yeah. And so there were a lot of people who were saying that Christians shouldn't be doing these things. Where does the Bible say we should be doing this kind of stuff?
Those Christians were wrong, right?
They were wrong. And so, but Christians were operating on the principle that, no, God made all human beings in his image and likeness.
That's to my accounting, though. This is my view. This is what I'm already presenting. Right. I have no problem with Christians using both their Christian ethics and rationality and logic, which philosophy probably better than I do. Lots of original philosophy comes out of Christianity. Right?
Yes.
It's beautiful.
What I'm saying is we agree they're permitted.
They don't just point to the Bible. And that is my...
Fine.
Well, that's my whole point on Christian nationalism.
Good. Because I do think a lot of people who are...
No Christian nationalism.
I am against...
My definition of Christian nationalism.
Sure, but I don't think that applies to there is a huge spectrum of people who identify as that. Just like there's a huge spectrum of people who would say that they're secular. Like you said, there are anti-theists on the end of that spectrum that are nutballs.
Both these groups are heterogeneous, of course.
Exactly. The Christian nationalism I would agree with would say that there are major Christian principles that Christians have not just that they can, for example, vote to outlaw abortion. Christians have a moral duty. Every single Christian has a moral duty to rid the world of these unjust laws, if they are capable of doing so. They might
and if they're compelled by the argumentation, because a Christian argumentation for certain abortion unjust laws is, well, while we agree that at some point we are killing a person and that is wrong, unquestionably wrong, we are also necessarily setting up a system that we can look at the outcomes and go, we know increases child poverty, we know increases child, can I say the
harming child harm by bigger people. I know what you're getting
child
at
harm.
Here.
It increases mother poverty. It increases mother's death and infant death. So when we look at that type of system, we might go, okay, well, abortion is something we definitely want to decrease. And I'm with you on that one. I want less abortions too.
Wait, why?
Because I think that abortions at some point necessarily are a tragedy. Something evil is happening. And I don't know where that point is. But at some point, it certainly is, right? The Christian answer is to be most conservative. But the state answer cannot be to just be most conservative on moral issues.
So you want less abortions because it's just possible a person is being killed?
Well, no, at some point, there is unquestionably a person being killed.
But you don't know that point.
No one knows when insolement happens.
I'm not talking about insolement.
That's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about a person... The person I care about is obviously the ensouled person. If we make a meat human that isn't ensouled, like a clone, something like that, do I care about it being killed? Probably not. But if there's a soul in it, and if God goes, that's my creation, then yeah, I really care. Because I'm not opposed to animals.
I think we have different concepts of what the soul is. For me, the soul is the principle of life. It's what makes a living body different than a corpse. In fact, all living things have souls.
Okay.
But non-human living things have material souls. That principle disappears once they die. So the soul doesn't survive the death of the non-human body.
So what's ensoulment?
Ensoulment would be the principle of an immortal principle of life, or an immortal soul animating the human body.
Do we have one of those as well?
Do we have one of those?
Humans, yeah.
Yes,
human beings have that. What do you call that? Just because I want to use the same language. That's what I'm calling a soul. Is that immortal, metaphysical
you can just say ensoulment in relation to human beings.
Okay, but when I'm talking about soul, just so it's clear, I'm only trying to talk about this metaphysical magic soul that is infinite, that we can't test for. I'm not talking about consciousness or life.
Right, and I agree that's that principle of the body that survives. Your soul will
Goes
go
to
to
heaven.
goes to heaven when you die, or goes to be judged. Your intellect goes with it, and then you'll be reunited with your body at the resurrection of the dead.
Sure.
My point, though, is that all human beings, all individual members of the human species, irrespective of the question of whether they have a soul or not, because I can't empirically locate that, all of them are made in the image and likeness of God. And so my position is that Christians have an obligation to protect each and every one of them, those human beings, just a member of the human species, from evils like slavery or abortion or different kinds of abuse.
Unless God orders it.
Unless God orders you to do that?
Yeah,
All right.
like if he orders you to kill babies.
Okay.
Well, that's happened with the Amalekites, right?
That gets into difficult issues about biblical interpretation.
I agree, right? I view that as allegorical as well, but
I would hold that that's
don't.
but I would hold that that's non-literal warfare rhetoric, because saying all the Amalekites were slaughtered in Joshua, well, they happened to come back in Judges, so they obviously weren't literally all wiped out. That will take us.
Right, of course. And you don't need to sell me on allegory.
My point is that, God
it.
has authority over us in ways that we don't.
Sure, but the issue is you're championing along a lot of U.S. Christian nationalists who take all of this literally. Like you're already advocating for a theological system that you don't even fully align with.
I just don't want babies to be killed. That's not
totally
that hard
fine.
of a thing.
And I think you do a really good job of exercising everything that I'm talking about that Christians can do. And I have no problem with it.
But I'm saying that if you care about divine command theory, doing what God wants, being a moral person, you would go to the voting booth with me and vote for abortion to be illegal,
I'm a
too.
Canadian immigrant, so I can't vote for it. But
well, come here.
Well, the issue is,
look,
I wouldn't because of certain outcomes, for example. So I want...
We've got nicer weather, and you won't end up being in assisted suicide if you get sick or something.
Well,
which is a difficult thing in Canada.
I'm fine with euthanasia.
Well, that's a separate thing we can
Sure,
debate.
but if we go into it, again, you're saying like, well, abortion, like the ending of that human life, whether it's ensouled or not, is the greatest evil. And I'm saying, I'm saying
killing
a future like ours creates a lot of issues with this because, for example, if the life promised not even just to the infant but to the mother is not necessarily a good life, right? Then we have complications of saying, okay, well, what's a system politically that can lead to the most flourishing and the least amount of abortions? Okay, one thing is way better access to contraceptives and way more education about it. But as a Catholic, would you allow legally contraceptive access, or would you ideally politically advocate against it?
I think in an ideal world, contraception would be illegal. It was illegal at one point, and the world didn't fall apart. With the Pope Paul VI, for example, predicted in Humana Vitae that with the greater spread of contraception, there would be greater degradation of the status of women. There would be an increase in adultery. He made many predictions. There would be an increase in divorce, and many of that did come to pass. But I want to go back to making abortion decrease. One way, like in Texas, we have a huge decrease in abortions because it's illegal.
We also have a massive spike in child poverty, mother and infant death, and child abuse.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
Even if there was...
it went up by 11% in 6 months alone of children being surrendered to foster care system. Infant and child mortality, I think, increased by 36%.
Okay, well, is it better for a child to be adopted or to be killed?
Well, once a child's doing a lot of heavy lifting, right?
Right. So, but you agree, though, it'd be better for a child to be adopted.
Of course.
Or a 1-year-old.
Or a 1-year-old.
Or a newborn.
Or a newborn.
How about 9 months in the womb?
How about 2 weeks old in the womb?
To be adopted rather than killed? Mm-hmm. Sure. Don't kill him. That's a human being.
Sure,
don't directly kill this person.
I would agree that it's human life. I would not agree that it's the same. I don't know if it's ensouled. I don't care that much.
Well, set that aside.
That's all I care about as a Christian.
But what's your test to know if somebody has a soul?
You can't know it. So I go with
how you feel.
Why are you laughing?
How you feel.
Why are you laughing?
Well, that's a huge thing. Like if somebody has a right to life.
Would you agree that I've been nothing but good faith in this conversation, engaged with you seriously?
I agree, but I think I am allowed if I find a position to lead to very horrible consequences.
Then ask me about it.
Sure.
Rather than laughing and then presuming a bunch of stuff. For example, you say, well, I think that's horrible and I don't think there's any logic or reason. Well, I have logic and reason for why I argue for this type of thing, right? So while we don't know when ensoulment begins, right, we do know things that mark ensoulment, like consciousness. I think we all agree, for example, that consciousness is probably a good mark. Do you know anything about human brain organoids?
You mean the parts of the brain?
No, human brain organoids are like this new technology that's being utilized to understand like brains.
No, I'm not familiar with.
Can I tell you about them? Because I think they
Sure.
introduce an
Then I want
interesting
answers to the questions about how all these terms mean to you. But go ahead.
Sure. A human brain organoid is this new technology where we basically take stem cells, like pluripotent stem cells, and we put them on the direction, I won't get into the genetics, of being brain cells. And we culture them and develop them. They're basically little human brains in vats. And so far, mostly what we've done is rudimentary, like the pons, the medulla, which are like hindbrain structures that do like your heart rate and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not a complete brain.
Well, we can keep scaling. We've now built a limbic system, and it's been huge in helping us understand major disorder development.
Sure.
But at some point, with human brain organoids, in fact, they just had a symposium a couple of months ago to basically go, when is that maybe a person? And so we go, okay, well, personhood, obviously, even by what you're agreeing to me, yeah, okay, well, it's just a stem cell. It doesn't matter. It's like, okay, well, at some point it matters. What about when it's got a full frontal lobe? Is that a person
I would
now?
say a person is ultimately an organism. So human beings are a organism. When you stop being a whole living entity, then you stop existing. So your existence begins when you have coherence. So when you have what I call organic unity. So when you are a whole organism on a track of development, and then when you lose the ability to act as a whole organism and start to decompose and break into smaller parts, that's when you die. That's when the person no longer exists. But the brain, it may be the case a person is an organism, but the brain is just the most indispensable organ. Similar to how a tree is still a tree. You can chop off a lot of branches. Like you cut off my arm, I'm still a person. Cut off my arms, my legs. You could whittle me down maybe to the brain being an indispensable organ for me to exist as an organism.
Seems like it. Yeah, that seems like actually really
But I'm not
rational
identical to the
conclusion.
brain, but I'm an organism. It's just at this stage of development, I need this to keep the organism going.
A dualist would say you're not just the brain, but it's pretty important. It's probably like the best material place, right? And when I look at spirituality, I see what we have as like this immaterial, what atheists would call spaghetti monster in the sky. And essentially I always tell atheists, yeah, I believe in magic, right? I believe in these metaphysical, non-material things. But I also think that there are certain points at which the immaterial has to touch this plane that we can interface with, right? I don't know if you agree with this, but when we look at a human brain organoid, well, what if we give it all 4 lobes? Okay, and then we give it access to a computer, because we've given human brain organoids access to a computer. And even with just a rudimentary limbic system, they can play Pong really well, actually. They learn how to do it, and they get really, really good at it. What if we touch all lobes? What if we let it develop all to that point? It can now talk. It can tell you its opinion on things. It can maybe express to you how it feels to be a little brain in a jar. Is that a human being? Is that a human being of moral consideration and worth? And I think the simple answer that everyone has is, I don't know.
I have an answer to that. I would say your thought experiment is under-described. So in order conceivably for something like that to happen, it couldn't just be a brain in a vat. You would have to be running blood through the brain so that the neurons are able to fire, for example, and that the brain cells have oxygen in order to function.
It's usually included in the brain in the vat, but yeah.
Well, but what you end up doing,
life, yeah.
In order to do what you would just end up doing is you would end up using clone cells. You're basically you're cloning and creating another human organism.
Sure.
You're just rerouting its development in a different direction. But you've just created a very stunted organism. It's basically you've created a human being without arms, legs, or an
But you grant me that
intensity.
it's an organism.
Yeah, because you would have to. Is
it ensouled?
Is it ensouled? If it is an organism, yeah. I mean, you're going to create a heart-lung machine to keep oxygen going through it. If it's animated.
So when you're on the trolley problem and you've got the brain vat with all of the necessary conditions and it's typing to you, help me, Trent, please save me. And on the other side, you've got like a 1-year-old infant. Mm-hmm. Who are you picking? I'm still picking the 1-year-old infant.
Oh my goodness.
It's tough. Can you grant me that if you're going by the things that we're vowing here, which is ensolement, we don't actually know if that human brain is it. I lean towards no, but we could be wrong.
Yeah, there's going to be cases where we're not sure. Just like if you said we cloned a Neanderthal and had them on the track, and there's a 1-year-old baby. Okay, I'm not sure what to pick.
I
think you would show more. What?
I picked the 1-year-old baby, no question.
Okay, but I still think you wouldn't necessarily start dissecting the Neanderthal if he started acting in more human ways. But I'm going back.
What is that? Sorry, how is that a rebuttal to anything that I'm saying? I'm not
because there are going to be
there.
cases, just because there are cases where we're not sure if something is a human being or not, that doesn't distract from the fact that there's objectively good reasons to say every human embryo and human fetus is a human being.
I think there are good reasons. I've already granted you this. I've already said, I think that there are strong arguments. I think future like ours is actually a really strong anti-abortion position. I've fully granted you this. The thing that I'm actually doing is saying, I think it's really dangerous when Christians really try to insist that this stuff is obvious, and particularly when they do it only from the Bible.
Fine.
And that's my concern about Christian nationalism, is you going, well, this is just kind of obvious. It's not. I don't know what to think about human brain organoids. I can't tell you. This is a technology that is happening. We could theoretically have brains and vats that are
hasn't happened. Here's the thing. That hasn't happened yet.
Only because we've stopped developing them.
But human, and I think there's good reason to not pursue that kind of
Me too. Because at some point there's a
experiments.
person there.
Probably. It's the same.
Probably.
The same as when we are doing genetic experiments on gamete cells, or if we create using monkey eggs and human sperm. It's no, we shouldn't be doing this kind of stuff with human life just to see what will happen. But we do know human embryos and human fetuses are human beings. So my argument, and I guess Christian nationalists would just make this argument. It's not even a Christian argument. It's just all human beings, all members of the human species should be protected from being directly killed. Okay, and human embryos and human fetuses.
Except for death penalty, or are you anti-death penalty?
I'm anti-death penalty.
Okay.
Okay, so
so you reject the Don Marquis argument, because Don Marquis is for. Sorry, that's Future Like Ours.
Yeah, or Marquis. Yeah. Yes, the Future Like Ours argument says that what makes killing wrong is that it's wrong to deprive someone of a valuable future, a future like you and I might have.
Right.
And I think that explains...
Which is good, which is the reason the future matters is because of the goods of that future. But that's a really big part of the argument. It's not just a future. It's a future like ours, which begs into an assumption that it's a good future, right? That's what it argues. And so again, I'm not saying
I think that Marquis's argument explains the wrongness of killing in many cases, but not all cases. And so it's part of a cumulative case about why killing human beings is wrong. But I think there's an overarching, because, for example, if somebody jumps off the Golden Gate Bridge
But you're not opposed to war. You're for the Crusades,
no,
though.
Hold on. Let me finish,
okay, I'll write a pin on it.
If somebody jumps off the Golden Gate Bridge to end themselves, I can't use a sniper rifle to pick them off midair to show I'm a great shot, even though they don't have a valuable future like ours.
Right.
But they are a human being made in the image and likeness of God.
Sure.
And so I am making an argument. I just really would like you to be pro-life and on fire with protecting the unborn like I am.
I believe you that you would really like me to do that.
I would very much like that. I think these are solid, rational reasons. I don't see a good reason to reject them.
Well, the issue, I don't reject preserving human life as much as possible. What I reject is the process legally by which you want to do that. Because I think all of the goods of the future matter too. And so would I like a world as well where abortion is basically doesn't exist anymore because there's no grape and there's no incest and there's no, that one's fine. There's no all of the things, all of the tragedies, including poverty, including single motherhood, including deadbeat dads. My dream world is obviously that abortion doesn't have to happen. And we can be aligned in that. The actual difference here is that the way I go about targeting it is going to be different. And the reason why we go about targeting it differently is logic and reason. Right? My logic and reason is harm to mother, harm to baby, harm to society, right? Increasing poverty, things like that. Your reasoning is you have a very strong anti-killing position, which is totally fine. It's just like my hierarchy of like things like suffering might be significantly higher than just like than what yours is, for example.
And I would want you to see that I think you have the same level of opposing killing innocent human beings when it involves born people or harming innocent human beings. Like it's not either or. It's not like we'd say, well, should we outlaw marital grape?
I'm for euthanasia, so it's not obvious that I just grant that. Let me
finish.
Sure.
When it comes to like marital grape, we wouldn't say, well, let's just work on all the factors that lead husbands to do something like that and ameliorate this and poverty and this or that. You can do that, but we can also just make it illegal and you don't do that. And it works really well to stop these things from happening.
But it has a whole bunch of other sequelae
or child labor. Take child labor. We might say, well, let's just improve the economy so kids don't have to go work in coal mines. Their parents will feel like they have to send them. Well, we can do that, but also if you just make it illegal to do that to kids, it turns out people don't do that anymore.
Exactly. This actually
so we should do it for abortion.
So I think you're fine to make that argumentation for abortion. And what you're actually pointing to is the modus operandi of why I think the state is good when it's separated from the church, right? Because what you have is moral issue X.
No, wait, because the Catholic Church started the pro-life movement in the United States of America. Even Protestants were late to get on board.
Okay.
And so I am grateful. The reason that first, abortion was generally illegal in this country. In the 19th century,
very accessible,
well, the American Medical Association in the 19th century called abortionists modern-day Herods, in reference to King Herod, who massacred the innocents.
Sure.
Then it was liberalized, partly due to the work of increasing contraception, infidelity, greater migrations to urban areas, leading to women becoming pregnant without social support like they had in the towns and rural country areas.
Yeah.
Then abortion proliferates from there, becoming made legal in the 1960s. Then Roe says everybody has to make it legal for all 50 states. It was the Catholic Church that started the National Right to Life movement in the early 1970s to help to restore the right to life unborn children once had. And I gave the example of MLK, and when it comes to racial segregation, you had Christians who were involved in abolition. When the church is acting authentically, it makes the state good and virtuous. And I think that's a good thing.
I agree, but it does it through engaging in the political system the way that every other person is allowed to participate. It doesn't do so by using laws to preferentially prioritize certain Christian values. This is why James Madison, do you know what James Madison was opposing in his memorial remonstrance, like his biggest everything for separation of church and state? Do you know? And it's esoteric. It's fine.
I thought you were talking about the supporting churches financially, but is there something else you're referencing?
Well, it was specifically a tax that was going to be taken from all Virginians to just fund religious teachers.
Yeah.
And James Madison, a Christian, was vehemently opposed to this because he said that this is just one step towards tyranny of church, which we just left, guys. We're not going back there. This is why he says in his argumentation that any sort of policy that gives extra preferential treatment to Christian ideology or Christians themselves over other people is not only against what we want in our state, it's also anti-Christian in this type of situation, right? And so what I'm saying to you on Christian nationalism is I think it's totally fine for Catholics and all Christians to speak out against abortion and all these sort of things. I think it is all in your operandi as citizens to do so. What I am not okay with is Christians going through the back doors, using lobbying systems, paying off politicians to get their favor, to force through abortion without convincing the populace of that vote, which 80% is for.
Argument, why not replace the word Christian with the word people?
What do you mean?
You're against people lobbying and backdooring and using these deceitful methods to achieve public policy.
I'm against Christians doing it
rather than establishing. Well, then why is it? So you're saying it's okay for atheists to get together?
It's not okay. It's
use
wrong.
Political.
It's wrong.
Okay.
But again, I hold people to their own moral standards typically.
Okay. Well, some people have the moral standard. I don't care. I just want to win, and I want to get my way.
Yeah, but even most atheist systems would look at that person and go, yeah, that's not a very good person, right? Because this is maybe something I'm curious. You talked about this a bit before. Would you grant me that Christian ethics, many people can have Christian ethics without having a Christian faith?
They can have some. They can have
like
some
Thomas
aspects of the Christian. Yeah, they can have aspects of the Christian ethical system.
Yeah, they're very informed by it.
Well, I would
right?
say many people.
In fact, the founding fathers were very informed by their Christian ethics.
Many people's opposition to things that they find in the Bible, that are regulated in the Old Testament, or other things like this, comes from living in a Christian society that values things like the intrinsic dignity of every human person. That they're raised in this Christian mythos, even if they don't explicitly affirm it, and so it guides them in the decisions that they make.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Sorry, I feel like I'm not connecting that to this broader conversation.
You said can people have Christian ethics even if they're not Christian?
Yeah.
And I would say if you are raised in a society that was founded by Christians and has Christian principles written into law.
Well, not written into law. They
were what motivated people.
Yes.
To
exactly.
And so
that's to my point.
For example, Catholicism was instrumental in being opposed to the divine right of kings. That was more of a Protestant idea. Catholics said you still had to listen.
Darn Protestants.
Well, you still had to
man.
listen to the Pope.
Yeah.
You still have to listen to him. But the idea that the king had a divine right to rule.
Yeah,
and
that was a
others
very
have a right to
Anglican thing.
Well,
if I'm
yeah,
correct.
it's this, and it was an idea the church said no, that the state, not only will men be judged, but states will be judged. Like, I mean, if you think about it, like, obviously no state can go to hell, but it can dissolve. But we can look to see different cultures and states have more or less unjust laws and practices. And Christians, when they go into societies, work to reform them to make them just. They go to India and outlaw sati. They go to East Asia and they outlaw foot binding.
But they also came here and they stole indigenous children from their parents and pierced their tongues with rods if they spoke their natural language. So I agree that Christian ethics, as somebody who's a Christian ethicist, I love Christian ethics.
Good.
Right? The problem is that when the state blends with Christianity in a removal of separation of church and state, what happens is that what is Christian ethics is very tied to power. And I think power is not a pursuit of the good. Power is a pursuit of power. And I think that that's where the Christian church goes so wrong, is when it gets blended with the church and state. I think that it typically, especially in the American institution, does not lead to good outcomes.
What do you think of
and
this?
Corrupts the faith.
Should our laws be based on the best ethical system?
Some of them, like the laws that are about morality specifically, yes. But there's lots of laws that are amoral and completely neutral.
Sure,
right?
and the best
Should our taxation system be based on Christian ethics?
It should be based on the best ethical system, right?
The principles of it.
Yeah, sure.
Of course.
And there's going to be cases where the ethical system...
But that's my position, just so it's clear.
Well,
the Christian nationalist position would say, no, it should be what is said, especially because you have to still deal with all your Protestant fundamentalists. They would say, no, it has to be what's literally in the Bible.
Yeah, I would tell them, let go of sola scriptura. It's not even in the Bible.
I agree.
Good.
Okay, base.
Perfect.
Protestants,
Thank you.
Look, okay, we can say many things about the branches. The Catholics are the soulless ones. The Protestants are the stupid ones. And the Eastern Orthodox are the cowards.
Well, what kind of Christian do you identify yourself as?
I'm Protestant because I'm protesting the church, but I love a lot of
stop
Catholic.
protesting.
Many Catholics are trying to convert me. You guys are compelling, but I'm still protesting the church. I have some issues with it.
We can work through that. We can work through it.
But I'm not.
Look who you've been complaining about.
Protestants.
Yeah, but I think that
that's who you want to work alongside, and your argument.
No, I actually don't.
Okay, then your argument enables it.
No, it actually doesn't, because I'm arguing from a principle that the Catholic Church has had a lot more practice in having a relation between church and state. So, for example,
this is why the founding fathers hated the Catholics.
But it's important because
the Catholics are like, no, guys, we can do state
Saint Ambrose
and nation together.
So Saint
really
Ambrose called for the emperor of the Roman Empire to repent of his slaughter of women and children at Thessalonica, for example. That saying that no, maybe in ancient Rome the emperor was above all, but you're not above God, and you have to be held to account. So we've had a long period in history of trying to understand, okay, how do we apply our principles to the common good? So, for example, Augustine and Aquinas were open or supported the idea that prostitution should be legal to prevent greater evils. And I would say that at least that principle is incorrect today, given the empirical harms we know of prostitution, with sex trafficking, with things like that. But there's going to be things where, as Christians, we have to investigate, here's the principles, how do we apply them? Right. But we know when we do apply them overall, it makes society better.
I agree. And you and I are actually doing the same thing. The issue is that, again, I would never go around and say contraception should be illegal. I would never say that, because I recognize that we live in a secular state.
Do you think minors
I know Brian's going to go fuck around, okay?
No, look at him. This choir boy right here. No way. He's got a heart of gold.
Why am I catching strays here?
Yeah, okay. But Brian, you're for casual sex, right? I know, so I'm giving you a lead in for your super chats.
Whoa. Casual sex. I'm for where are you getting
Oh,
this?
yeah, you want abstinence until marriage?
Well, no. Hey.
Okay.
Hold on, but that doesn't mean it's casual sex.
Okay, only with a girlfriend, long term.
Preferably, yes. I think sex should be.
But maybe sometimes no.
Well, okay. I mean, really quick, my position, since you're involving me in this, I think it should be if you're going to have sex with somebody, there should be an aiming towards having a long-term relationship with them. Hopefully, it's the one. You know.
Says every guy who's like, no, I definitely her, and then he has sex with her, and he's like, never mind. The post-nut clarity,
really
famous.
Quick, while I've been invoked here, Nathan, can you pull up the prompts? I just want to do a check-in here with you guys and see if you guys want to pull it up.
We were dancing around a little bit.
So here are the prompts. Do you guys want to, looking at these now, do you want to switch gears? Do you want to...
What do you want?
I have a question for you.
All
Wait,
right.
really quick before you dive into that question,
course,
just a
super
quick
chats
reminder.
first.
Actually, we don't have any.
Wah, wah, wah.
Speaking of, though, guys, if you want to display a message, $10 display, $100 read. And also, guys, go to pull up Twitch really quick, Nathan. Guys, drop us, if you're watching over there on Twitch, drop a follow and a Prime sub if you have one. And then if you are enjoying the stream, you want to see more debates, please like the video. And we'll host more of these. Anyways,
There's not enough
right
OnlyFans
back-
models for them to yell at. Come on, guys,
That
I'm
is-
here.
well, the
You can yell at
debates-
me.
Hey, the debates also do great too. You know what it is? Maybe we're getting into a recession. You know,
It's probably part of it.
What is that
It's also not
thing?
like we're not like heated and insulting each other and being super nasty to
We're
each
actually
other.
we're making
I
progress.
was gonna say this is one of the best conversations on these ideas I've had in a long time. So I really appreciate that, Trent.
But that's-
sometimes you're being slippery, but mostly you're being good. Sometimes I'm being slippery though too.
That's the nature of the beast. But the thing is, I care a lot about these issues. That's why people ask me, like, okay, will you come on the podcast to debate Andrew? I'm like, debate on what? Like, whether we should be insulting and abusive. Like, I want to debate serious, important issues. And the
Well, I
serious,
think you agree with me on Christian nationalism, so I think you should take it to him and push him on why theocracy is bad.
I guess it depends. For me, though, the idea of implementing we live in a country where we can't even get a federal ban on abortion after 20 weeks. We can't even get that. So the idea that we're going to repeal the 19th Amendment and institute theocracy is, to me, a fever dream so far over the horizon, it's silly to entertain. But what I can't, oh good, now people are maybe now they'll get upset. But what I can do is say, there are things we can do, is that on the state level, there are places where amendments to ban abortion have only lost by 5%, maybe 10%. We're in a good, and I think in a lot of those places where the pro-life movement failed, it's because there is a significant number of people who say, they kind of have a view similar to yours. It's like, well, I am pro-life, I'm against abortion, but I don't want the state telling people what to do. In order to protect children, I desperately have to convert those people into my view, which is, as a Christian, you have a duty to protect human beings from being exploited, whether it's abortion or euthanasia or other things that could be exploiting people.
Yeah, I want an empirical argument on this. Like, do you think per capita, does Canada or America have less abortions? Per capita, so not total population, but...
Canada probably has less, but they have a different social structure.
Yeah, but why? Like, what do you think is unique in Canada that even though it's fully decriminalized, abortion is not illegal in any way, shape, or form, all the way up to 9 months. It's exclusively between a woman and her doctor. Why is there less in Canada? And I agree that there's a lot different between these nations. What do you think it is?
Abortion rates are complicated. It could be that there are different. There's different poverty levels. There could be different uses and practices of contraception. So in the United States, here's my thing though. It's like, well, just do sex education. Like people, I once went to a college campus and we were doing our abortion outreach. We were talking to people about the issue of abortion. And a guy came up to me and he said, well, why aren't you handing out condoms? And I said to him, the campus health center here at your school, I went by there today. They have a free basket of condoms at the front desk. And he said to me, yeah, but I have to walk all the way to the other side of campus. Why should I have to do that? I think the problem then, it's not contraception, it's the lack of virtue in general, when that's the attitude we're seeing
Americans
from people.
are less virtuous than Canadians?
No, I'm saying that they might be less polite, but that's a virtue for you guys.
True.
But what I'm saying is that just pinning it on me to say, oh, well, if you were just more supportive of contraception, things like that, the rates would go down. They might a little, but it's multifaceted. There's poverty demographics, class demographics, racial demographics, religious demographics that are going to affect all of that. But I'm in favor of doing things that will reduce abortion. For example, 87% of abortions are obtained by unmarried women. So if you increased the rate of marriage, you would decrease the rate of abortion. If someone has their partner...
How do you increase it?
Increase the rate of marriage? Lot of issues there. I mean, it's something I do care a lot about.
Do you do it like culturally, or do you like mandate it through the legal system?
Oh, you could do both. You could have legal.
What do you prefer? I'm curious.
Well, both. Like to get more people to marry, you might have tax incentives for them that they'll be taxed at a lower rate. They get tax bonuses if they are married. Penalized if they live together and they're not married.
So it's illegal to Commonwealth.
No, not illegal.
Common law, sorry.
To reside together. I think that the state should reward people if they make this social commitment that's good for society. And marriage is good for society. It's good for children. Lowering barriers.
Totally with you on the tax
The other thing you could do
definitely
is
opposed to the illegal stuff.
Yeah, you could decrease barriers to marriage by making it easier for men to secure employment so they can provide for a family. Not make it as difficult to find a job. I don't know. This is getting us into political prescriptions. It's not my wheelhouse.
Sure, and that's totally
But
fine.
I'm fine doing all of that and still having just a clear message to say, yeah, we can decrease abortion. It's like you and I are like, yeah, I agree. Let's decrease abortions. There's different. I don't want to use anything evil. There's lots of non-evil ways to decrease abortion, and one of those non-evil ways is by outlawing it. So I want to do all the non-evil ways to decrease abortion. I don't see what's wrong with that.
The reason why I think making it illegal is because it increases child and mother mortality, right? You will run into, no matter what week you set it at, you run into necessarily.
That's actually not true.
This is true. This is from Texas data that's come out from the last year. This is unquestionably true.
No, I've covered this, and when you make comparisons to other countries,
it's not other countries. This is Texas to like there's an actual study that stays in the States, and it compares basically rates of child mortality, all of the bad outcomes that I'm concerned about, to states that are more and less restrictive.
But that study,
America has.
I know the study you're referring to. There were headlines all about it saying that maternal mortality in Texas went up 6 months before abortion was banned. So it's like it can't be abortion that's causing that.
That's a
post hoc rationalization.
So, well, it's not post hoc. The only criticism you could offer it is maybe this is correlation, not causation. The issue is that the study that came out from Texas after the ban specifically was comparing and contrasting times before the ban and after the ban. And we did see the increases of foster care utilization. We saw increases of infant and child mortality and mother mortality, because one of the issues that a hardline, weak law imposes into a medical care system is that the moment it's past whatever week you set it as, now there's this difficulty of investigation. Because if, say, for example, she is under the awful situation where she's miscarrying, there needs to be a verification that it is a legitimate miscarriage and not a potential attempted murder. Right? Okay. And so this is what runs into a lot of issues why mother mortality tends to increase, because usually the window to intervene on a woman who is miscarrying and not developing things like sepsis is a pretty narrow window. And it's very important that you be able to move on it, and investigations are not particularly fast, especially in the case of investigation on potential murder or attempted murder, which is what it would be classified as.
All right, here's my problem with two problems with that. Number one, if the argument is, well, we ought not pass this law because it has negative consequences, you couldn't pass any laws or do anything at all. Anything that you do will have negative consequences.
Is that my position?
Your position was we should not outlaw abortion because it modestly increases maternal mortality rates or rates of children being placed in foster care.
Right, and I also don't think I guess I'll add to that, I don't think it actually addresses the core of the problem, which is abortions happening.
Does it decrease abortions?
It decreases legal abortions for sure. It also increases illegal abortions.
In Texas, overall...
There's probably less overall, yeah.
There's less overall. Okay, so that's a positive outcome.
Sure, and then there's a number of negative outcomes.
Right, in the same way that if you build highways, more people die in car accidents. If you spend more on education, suicide rates go up. We know that one. But these are still good things to do, and making it illegal to kill children is just as worthwhile as building a road or building a school.
So is it accurate to summarize my position, though, which is the thing I was challenging you on, that I just think we shouldn't make policies if there's negative outcomes?
Is that, oh, no, I think
that's how you summarize my
your position would be that the negative outcomes do not balance out the positive outcomes.
No, my position would be that the negative outcomes of one policy is actually superseded by the negative outcomes of another policy. That's actually what my position is.
What are the two policies you're weighing here?
Say we do a 20-week abortion ban versus decriminalization. I think that decriminalization has a number of cons that come with it, but I think that they are lesser, and I think the strict abortion ban has greater. But I'd be open to flex. It's possible you could show me evidence that actually 24 weeks, we basically get out of this window of miscarriages because of some medical stuff, and I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Well, and it sounds like we can maybe scale it back.
But you can just have laws with exceptions. In Texas, you have if a woman's life is in danger or if there is a risk to her bodily health. And here's the thing, though. If you say, well, look,
why is there a risk to her bodily health, we can now murder that child?
If you guys can let each other finish.
Sorry.
Well, you were going. Trent,
My point is that just saying, look, if you're worried about someone not being able to get care for a miscarriage, then we can allow the physician exception to be wide enough so that no one is ever denied miscarriage care, but it might maybe result in a child being killed when they normally would not have. That is something we have to do with laws here and there. But that's different than abortion just being used for birth control, for example. But what I worry about is when you say, well, if we make abortion illegal, women could be prosecuted for miscarriage, they didn't do anything wrong. Well, look, if you make child abuse illegal, there are people who go to jail for shaken baby syndrome when their child died of natural causes, right? Mm-hmm. That happens. Mm-hmm. But is it better to have laws against child abuse than to decriminalize child abuse? That way no one's ever falsely imprisoned for child abuse.
Isn't it possible just as well with your abortion carve-outs? Couldn't we just make decriminalized carve-outs as well and outline specific types of things that we can investigate to being criminological? So say we say, as a nation, personhood begins at 15 weeks. Let's say that's the consensus right now. Isn't it possible that in the decriminalized state, if we have sufficient evidence to believe that after 15 weeks, a woman sought an abortion, not because of medical emergency, but because of just, I don't really want it anymore, that individual could be properly investigated? Couldn't we just do the inverse and just make these political carve-outs to account for the issues, the valid issues that you raised?
No, because I would just make the presumption being that if you are that it is wrong and illegal on the face of it to directly end the life of an unborn child, just like it would be on the face of it wrong to directly assault a child or a woman without decriminalizing and saying, well, maybe he had a good reason to hit that child or hit that woman. I start from the presumption it's wrong unless a physician exception is put into place. But I just think in general that people want to call it the Christian nationalist boogeyman or not. I would say that it's totally rational and that people have a moral duty. And if they fail to heed to that moral duty, they're morally responsible if they did nothing to prevent these children from being killed. Now, you might say, well, we're going to decrease it. I'm doing all these things that are fine to decrease it. But I also think people have a moral obligation to rid the world of laws that are designed to exploit other human beings.
So this is kind of like the legalistic piece that I'm concerned about. The Christian ethical principle should be concerned about like life, let's say preserving of life, right? As much as possible, and to act ethically towards, to have sanctity towards human life as much as possible.
Oh, keep going.
Oh, okay.
But once you finish, I'm just going to let two chats come in. Right back.
Absolutely. So, that's the Christian ethic. The issue is that now you're saying, and this is how Christians must act towards that ethic. And I'm going, if a Christian is doing, let's say you've got somebody who's very concerned about abortion, but they're not really on board with decriminalization. However, they're doing everything else. They're involved in better education for students. They're involved in abortion. They themselves, in adoption. They themselves are adopting. They're doing everything possible to be reducing abortion, but they're not willing to decriminalize it. It feels like, and I could be wrong, what you're saying is that person is still kind of acting immorally as a Christian.
Yes.
And I would say,
because they are morally on par with someone 150 years ago who said, I don't like people being enslaved, so I am working round the clock to make a cotton gin and free labor that will drive slavery out of business. I know I could have voted at the ballot box this year to end slavery, but who's going to employ these people? There's going to be all kinds of problems I don't want to deal with. I consider it on par that those people, while I'm glad they have a heart to want to end slavery, I would say they ought to be brave and do the right thing and cast a vote to free their brothers and sisters who are in bondage, just like Christians should cast a vote to free their brothers and sisters in the womb from being directly killed.
So
Hold on, just one moment here. I need to let some chats come through. We have Houston. He writes, Trent, man, you're the GOAT. Love to watch the debates. Can you please say Austin Forbes is a squid?
Austin Forbes is a squid. I don't know how that's going to get used against me later.
Clip it and ship it, I guess.
He's masturbating to
And
it
then we
later.
have a chat here from...
I don't know what that means, but
you,
I don't know. As long it wasn't skibbity, so I don't know.
And that was from Houston. He sent that in via streamlabs.com/whatever. As a reminder, $99 and up for reads, $10 for display. We have Angelus Draven. If you're going to bring Andrew up, at least get his position correct. He wants to get rid of the 19th, but also restrict men's rights to vote unless you serve in some way and or one person per household. Maybe if you debated Andrew, you would know this. And then Andrew does send in a message himself here. Thank you, Andrew. It looks like he's in the chat watching the debate.
I forgot, if you say Andrew's name one time, he gets summoned like a bad
either of
god.
you want to respond to this super chat?
Well, I don't. I mean, we brought up Andrew earlier. I think just more about because you also debated him on the same topic, and it was a different style of engagement. That's all. What I said earlier was, you've brought him up because you said other Christian nationalists, he has a different position.
In fact, that comment was a great piece of evidence. So Andrew actually insisted to me that he was not for theocracy. He's just, he's agnostic about if it happens. If it happens, that's okay. The issue is repealing the 19th is absolutely in the theocracy direction. Removing people's access to vote is absolutely in the theocracy direction, which is the thing I'm concerned about.
It's not theocratic. It's more autocratic because people in a non-religious state might have reasons to take away people's votes.
Do you think that Andrew wants an autocracy or a theocracy if you had to pick between the two?
I don't really know what
probably
he
a
wants
theocracy.
Sometimes.
Probably a theocracy. He probably wants Christian leaders.
Probably. I don't know. I think that what I brought up earlier, when I brought up the 19th Amendment, I don't recall hitching Andrew's name to that, even though I guess that's the argument.
You didn't.
No, I just said as Christians, I would like to implement Christian policies that do good. And I just don't see the point in arguing about something that when I look at the lay of the land is just not going to happen because X is not real life. We are not
you would want a repealing of the 19th?
Would I believe St. Thomas Aquinas in one of his passages talked about an ideal form of government that was sort of a mixture of aristocracy, monarchy, and representative democracy. My view about government, because people are going to have different views, I think that every person who is competent to have a voice in government should be heard. I think that, especially if you pay taxes, like you should be represented. If you have interests in the country, you should have a voice and you should be heard. If you're competent, some people are not competent.
How do you know if they're competent?
Being able to vote. We just for practical reasons would just say adults are presumed to be competent to make decisions about our country unless they've disqualified themselves by showing they're psychologically defective or criminally defective.
Which
I don't
care.
care.
Already do.
Yeah,
but being a woman would not be sufficient evidence for not being able to vote.
No, I don't think that's a big deal because then you go on any argument you make, it will eventually. And seeing in that chat, they said, "Well, Andrew thinks also." And I had this debate, not a debate, but I messaged Dale Partridge about this. He also wants to repeal the 19th Amendment, and he was honest when he said that unmarried men shouldn't be allowed to vote either. That only men who are the head of a household.
Google was the founding fathers, was the founding of America an autocracy? Go ahead and Google it.
Okay.
Wait, what is it?
Andrew.
The founding of America was an autocracy.
Okay.
Just Google it.
I will say this. I do appreciate Andrew's investment in this, but I don't go on his debates and get in the middle of them in super chats. So I do think it's very interesting that he's doing this here. He's more than welcome to sit down with you and do that. If he wants to watch, that's fine. But I do think it would be annoying for anyone, like if I were to go in the middle of one of his streams and insert myself in a debate with a super chat, I think that's a little annoying.
You wanted me to Google something, Kyla?
Just fact check the last thing, and then I guess maybe just don't bring up Andrew's comments anymore, just so that it's not derailing.
Well, it is below the threshold. We'll display them.
Whatever.
Okay, I'll do my best to wholly ignore it, but then don't read them out.
You did ask me to Google something. The United States was not founded as an autocracy.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It was established as a constitutional republic.
Yeah.
That's what my quick Google search.
So,
correct. Yeah.
I think when we organize society, and I lean a little bit more libertarian in some things, in that I feel like I prefer government have less power to do things because government tends to just be inefficient or dumb when they try to do stuff, so that when people vote, I think we should have high margins, like referendums should take 2/3 rather than 51% to pass. I think the harder it is to get things done, the less likely bad things will happen.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
That's sort of how and that's just what COVID seemed to teach me about giving people too much power. I like power dispersed. So I think what I would want is a kind of Christian limited government. I want more the state telling people, you can't do this, because even though it corresponds with religion, it also has some reason. You can't racially segregate people in public accommodations. You can't directly kill people who are in the womb. I would also apply this to euthanasia and assisted suicide. I know you have a different view on that, but I think that's not just a religious perspective. There are many secular groups that do oppose that.
Course,
and disability rights advocates that in many cases, the right to die often becomes a kind of social pressure. And then when you have insurance companies saying, we can't give you your cancer medication, but we'll give you a $500 voucher for assisted suicide, then it gets really horrifying.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I hope that I can communicate to you is, because epistemic humility is probably one of the most important things to me as like a thinker, right? And so I want to be
You need to know what you don't know.
Well, you can't ever truly know what you don't know, which is why you do your
Not
best.
everything you don't know, but some things.
Yeah, but you do your best to orient yourself to go, is the thing that my opponent is saying reasonable? And I think there's lots of reasonable arguments for lots of things, right? I even think that there are reasonable arguments against abortion or for abortion, right? The main thing that I'm not willing to do in this conversation is to get to paint certain people of a certain ilk, particularly people that aren't here, like secular people, because I can only represent secular positions so far because I'm not secular. I don't hold to a secular worldview. Is to look at that and go, it's just incoherent by nature because I don't. You
want to put religion or Christianity in a kind of ghetto, though, that's sort of separated. Well, you don't, but you don't, because you did say politicians should act in accord with Christian convictions.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
They should not impose their direct sectarian views.
Christians should be better in such a way that people are like, my evangelical position is I wish more people were Christian. Of course I do. In fact, I am not a spiritual leader, which is why we talked beforehand about like not going into a ton of theology, because I understand that I have a very atypical view compared to a lot of American Christians. However, my dream would be that like all people meet Jesus and feel his love and like convert to him.
Do it, man.
Well, the issue is that I will never do that through state policy. If my state tries to say you cannot be Christian, well, then I'm probably going to push against it. And do I think that it's reasonable that many Christians feel I must vote against abortion? I think it's totally reasonable. And I wanted to go back to the analogy that you drew with slavery, because I think that there's a couple of important things as to why obviously slavery is not analogous to abortion specifically.
It's not completely analogous, sure, but nothing is.
Nothing.
You can do your best to make connections.
Of course. But I think the analogy between these two things are part of why we go, is a Christian required to vote against abortion, to vote to enshrine abortion as illegal? And I think one of my biggest issues is, in the case of slavery, one of the disanalogies is, in this case, you're voting to remove rights. Right, sorry. Let me back up. I completely misspoke. In the case of slavery, what you're doing is to remove restrictions, legal restrictions on people. Whereas in the case of abortion, you are voting to impose restrictions on people. I think that there are good arguments for abortion being bad. I think that there are bad arguments for abortion being bad. And I think that there are good arguments on the other side of saying, maybe we should decriminalize it to a certain point, try to lessen it. And the reason why I don't think that these things are analogous necessarily is because I think, for example, one of the facts that we really can empirically know right now is that Black people are humans, just like everyone else. But we don't empirically know when a fetus is ensouled. We don't. We can't.
How do we, when you say human, do you mean, what is that? Please define that word.
An ensouled human being. Worthy of moral
you don't want to use
consideration.
The word human in the definition. That doesn't help us.
An ensouled person.
Okay, a human noun is an ensouled person.
Worthy of moral consideration. Because obviously in this situation, contextually, I'm talking about morals.
What is...
Because obviously human can be defined.
Well, what is a person? What is
biology?
Are there persons that are not ensouled?
Like these human brain organisms could be, theoretically. Possibly, yeah.
So you think there could be biological human beings that don't have a soul?
Possibly, yeah. Like
it sounds like what you're saying is a person isn't, not human is ensouled person. It sounds like you're saying person is ensouled human.
That's person?
I think that's what you're really saying.
No, what I'm maybe. Let me reclarify again. I am saying a human being is somebody of equal moral consideration to everything else. The thing that confers the moral consideration for me is the point of insolement. That's what I care about. So when I go, is there humans that don't have souls? Maybe, because if you define human as biological Homo sapien, right, cells of biological Homo, that's organized to some degree.
Organism, yeah.
Oh, no. Yeah, an organism. Well, then, by what we agreed, human brain organoids are organisms, but I definitely don't know if they're ensouled, and I definitely don't now morally
they don't exist yet, so we should not.
They do exist.
We have not constructed a full brain this way.
We've constructed a brain insofar as we know that it experiences pain and it can play video games. We have done this.
But could you do that with a pig brain?
To play
Pong?
Not even
pigs play games with their snouts. Pigs are really smart. They get them and they do puzzles and things like that.
Exactly. This is why. This is to my point.
But they're not persons.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying I don't know though. At some point, it's probably a person, maybe. Like when it has all four lobes. This is going back to that conversation being like, well, when does personhood begin? And the answer is, we don't super know. We don't know when ensoulment begins.
But why are we, it sounds like you're saying, I don't want Christian nationalism, but one of the most important laws we have, what makes someone a person, you're making it contingent on an unverifiable religious principle, whether someone has a soul.
Well,
you're more of a
level.
Christian nationalist than I am.
No, because not at a legal level. I would never say that the legal standard for person should be of like who we confer rights to is ensoulment. I've never said that.
Okay, then what is the legal standard of who we confer the right to life to?
I don't know it off the top of my head right now. I don't know what America has. I think unfortunately right now it's probably birth canal is like what bestows citizenship.
Yeah, it's every human being that is born, though except for states where abortion is outlawed, or
even then they don't treat it like murder. So it's like the state itself is kind of acting.
Here's where the state does.
Okay.
You are a person with legal rights if you are a born human, or in 38 states and under federal law, if you are a loved and wanted unborn human. Because in those states, if the mother wants the child and the child is killed by someone, you stab a pregnant woman in the abdomen and the fetus dies, it is counted as homicide.
Yeah, you could borrow this from Exodus 21. It feels like maybe in the direction of what Exodus 21 is doing by separating out these like unformed versus formed in the Septuagint.
No, what I'm saying there is we're hypocritical as a country because we treated as homicide the killing of wanted unborn children. I'm just saying that the child who is not wanted by his mother is equally valuable and ought to be treated the same way.
Sure, and I agree that that would be better. But the issue is
then let's make the law protect them. Let's do it.
No, because again, I want to drive down abortions, but I do see all of the bad outcomes that come with certain abortion laws. For example, if you could supply me empirical evidence that my main concerns about child mortality, mother outcomes is reduced at 20 weeks. When you ban it at 20 weeks, actually all those things reduce, then I'd probably be fine with a 20-week ban.
What percent can it go up where it's tolerable for you? What if we outlaw abortion? Like in Texas, we outlawed abortion, and in 1 year, 10,000 children were saved. Let's say it only raised maternal mortality by 1%. Would that be an acceptable cost?
So what week are you outlawing it?
I'm outlawing it just in general.
And it's treated as murder?
That's surgical and chemical abortions. It's not necessarily treated as murder. Like
right now, investigated?
the way that we have the law now is that the abortion provider is the one who is arrested and who faces sanctions for doing that.
Sure, regardless of who, somebody's being investigated here.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not none of the evidence so far for me for like the ban policy gets to the heart of like one of my main concerns, which is mothers who genuinely need medical care are denied it because of abortion policy. I think that's like really, really intolerable to me. And so that's why I'm for the decriminalized position.
I am very skeptical of that. You can go to my channel, I'll send you the episode about it. I have looked into a lot of these cases where it's blamed on abortion, but then you have that the hospital just simply failed to act. In many cases,
why did they fail to act?
Who knows? A lot of times
their liability is on the line, and a doctor is never going to risk losing his license over this decision.
But it's not because the law says
putting it on the doctor
the law says it's up to the physician's judgment. Look, in a lot of cases, just in hospitals, doctors and nurses, they'll make bad calls and people get hurt as a result. That's just what happens in medical care. But in general, people are better. It's better to have hospitals than not have hospitals, even though in rare cases, bad things happen to people.
This isn't my argument, right? This isn't analogous to my argument. Because my argument isn't bad things happen. My argument is that we have to look at this in a morally pluralistic way here, where we are basically balancing different harms. And we have to decide which harms are tolerable to what extent and why, right? And so this is the balance that I'm doing. And it's super fair that you come to a different conclusion.
Yeah.
I'll just pause for that.
But what I would say, though, is you could have these other kinds of debates on a lot of other issues, and people did. Like you could say, well, you know, if you outlaw child labor, it turns out where child labor was outlawed, child abuse rates went up and poverty went up because the kids couldn't make money, and when they didn't make money, their dads beat them. So maybe we should just decriminalize it. Well, no, this just ends up kids are being exploited and abused. We should just make it illegal and then have other things to address the other social harms related to the good of protecting children.
You can do that if people are compelled by it, but I suspect if you look actually at like cities and stuff like that where child labor is banned, what you actually see is mostly good outcomes. You see that kids aren't dying in workplaces, right? Kids are better able to access education.
And when you ban abortion, kids are not dying in abortion facilities.
Well, it's sure, but they might be funneled into foster care and suiciding at a higher rate. The poverty rates are exploding out of control.
Then by that logic, if you have a 2-year-old who ends up in foster care because he was wanted and his parents went on drugs, we should just kill that 2-year-old so he doesn't grow up in a horrible environment.
Well, at that point, we've already conferred citizenship rights.
But that gets, so then we have to, then that means we have to.
Not my only
so my
logic.
Question is,
future like ours is your argument.
No, it's not my argument. My argument is every human being should have a right to life because all human beings matter.
But you still can't
all
answer
human
the
beings have
questions.
equal rights.
Okay, but you still can't answer when ensolement begins.
I don't care. That's not my argument.
That's crazy to me. I feel like
why?
As a Christian, we of course care when ensolement begins because it's a major...
Because I can't see a soul, but I can see a human being.
Okay, is it bad that if somebody's brain dead that you turn off the ventilator?
No, because they are dead.
What if they were brain dead, but they were subsisted on their own? So they were brain dead on everything other than their hind brain. So their hind brain is still the
You're talking about the brain stem?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hindbrain. The hindbrain is the pons, the medulla. They're still operating. He's still breathing on his own. But there's a major lesion across his prefrontal cortex.
There is a difference.
The individual's never waking up.
People have a right to not be directly killed, but they don't have a right to...
What about stop feeding him?
Hold on. They have a right to not be directly killed, but they don't have a right to unlimited medical care. Okay? So in some cases, we might say, well, you know what? This person's brain has been 90% destroyed. We can keep them alive on a heart-lung machine, but it's extremely costly. It's very expensive, and we only have limited resources, and we don't think their prognosis is going to improve. So this expensive heart-lung machine has now become disproportionate care, and so we can remove this disproportionate care.
What about it's just food? All you need is to give him saline and a poo bag, to make sure.
You shouldn't starve people to death.
So keep feeding this brain lesioned, functionally brain dead by everything other than the medulla and pons indefinitely?
How about this? How about a human being who has an IQ of like 50?
So,
a severely mentally handicapped person who is nonverbal, non-rational. All they need to stay alive is food. Should we keep feeding them?
I mean, they're still like conscious. So yeah, this individual's not even
they have the consciousness level of maybe like a dumb dog, not even a smart dog, just a dumb dog.
I mean,
like a pug.
Dogs have pretty decently expressive experiences. So yeah, probably we should keep that individual alive because they're still having some level of conscious experience that we seem to value. Whereas the individual who is completely unconscious, right? He's laying in a bed, not awake, not interfacing with the world at all, not reacting to the world in any way, shape, or form, and is laying there. Should we withhold food? So that he dies naturally.
What I said is, no, you're starving them to death. I hold this principle. I don't think you should ever, all human beings have a right to the ordinary care they need to live.
Sure.
Now, there are going to be cases if someone is going to be dead in 48 hours, they might stop eating because it's painful for them. That's different to withhold food at that point. But notice what's going on there is like, if you think that their life doesn't matter, why even bother just dehydrating them? Just inject them with morphine. Why wouldn't you just do that?
I'm for assisted euthanasia.
Okay, so you're for active euthanasia.
Yeah.
Okay, but why not? Okay, then let me ask you this.
Because let me tell you why. So I grew up on the farm. I work with animals my whole life. I've seen lots of things die all the time.
Yeah.
And I also watched my husband's grandma pass away in the hospital. And there was this strange experience that I had on the farm. There are certain points in times where you understand where an animal is going. You understand the suffering between now and that point.
Of course.
And you end it.
Yes.
Always. And I watched his grandma not even be given the dignity that we give farm animals.
What you're talking about is treating people like animals.
No, what I'm talking about is giving people the dignity to choose when they would like to die.
But no, because what we do with animals who are suffering is we don't go to we usually, and in fact, I think it's immoral to spend like $80,000 on your cat's third kidney transplant. Let Fluffy go. It's over. That could have bought, 20,000 malaria nets in Central America. It's obscene.
Yeah, but they're not going, it's not immoral.
No, I think it could be wasteful, but that's beside the point. My point is, what you say as not giving people dignity, I would say that when we have animals who are sick, because you know what's funny? I asked Peter Singer this question. He visited my campus at ASU in 2008, and he was giving a talk about animal rights, things like that. And so I got up in the Q&A and I asked Singer, and this is a real thing. I said, my parents had a dog who was 12 years old, and he was, incontinent. So he was peeing all over the place, and they were sick of it. So they went and had the dog euthanized because he was a burden to us. And no one's going to adopt a 12-year-old dog that pees everywhere. And I asked Singer, was it immoral for them to do that? And he said, if the dog was a tremendous burden on your parents, then no, it would not be. And I said, okay, what about this other hypothetical example? What if it wasn't my dog? What if it's just my 1-year-old little brother who is brain damaged and will always be stuck at a 1-year-old mentality? And he is incontinent, and he's a burden. Should my parents have been able to euthanize him? And he really didn't want to answer, but he eventually said, yeah, if the 1-year-old...
Is he an atheist? I don't know who parents
Singer is an atheist, yes.
Okay, yeah.
But...
Yeah, because insolement
because being made in the image and likeness of God. But for me, I don't think you have any good grounds to say, we agree that everyone, at least from birth on, has a soul. And you're just quibbling about, well, you got to have a certain kind of brain to have a soul. And I reject that.
It's at least good evidence of a soul existing. And so before we know whether these, we see in the Bible, God engages with the death of infants very differently, right?
But wait,
even allegorically.
Can we go back to the euthanasia example? Because I really want to drive that home.
Can I respond for a second? Or
yes, then I want to go back because, okay. Then I'm writing it down.
Okay. Well, I've got a few written down that we haven't gone back to. Actually, just go ahead.
Yeah, because what I wanted to say there is that when we have an animal who is when you have an animal who's sick on the farm, you don't drive him to the hospital and do everything you can to treat him and keep him going. We realize
depends on the animal, actually.
What?
Depends typically on the animal.
Yeah, some people do that for dogs, things like that. But if you have a pig or a cow or a horse,
high quality pig that's known for its breeding quality, you're also going to spend a lot more in, because again, there's no souls there.
No,
so we can value them morally.
It's instrumental value. But so you but with animals, you always ask, does the animal have enough instrumental value to justify?
And you don't with humans because a soul exists.
And where we disagree, though, is I think we agree. Humans are treated as having intrinsic value, not mere instrumental value.
Yep.
And we agree it's because humans are made in the image and... Well, I think it's because they're made in the image and likeness of God. And you think it's because they have a soul, an immortal soul.
Yeah, I don't think looking like God is what matters. I think the thing that matters here is that infinite peace. I think when we say the likeness of God, we're talking about that infinite soul peace that we're is allowing us to some degree to engage with God just here and now when we pray.
So with that example with euthanasia, for me though, when we resort to, if someone is suffering, we are just going to kill them. When we do that, there is nowhere to draw the line to say that we have gone too far, to say, that's inhuman to do.
Well, their consent could be the line that we draw there.
Well, no, because here's the reason. Because usually in many cases when someone, let me choose my words carefully because I don't want to get axed or demonetized, unalive, ends themselves, things like that. When people choose to, normally, would you agree, when people choose to unalive themselves, we intervene and we forcibly stop them.
Mm-hmm. Usually because we disagree with their assessment. But in the case of certain individuals, like my husband's grandmother, I think we would agree with their assessment because she actually made that choice.
No, but
she
notice
was begging to be
the
left
assessment.
Leave the hospital.
The assessment is
two things:
lebenswert lebens, life unworthy of life,
suffering.
well, do you know where the phrase comes from?
I don't.
The Nazi eugenics program.
Sure. I'm not
That
for
was the
Nazi
Holocaust
eugenics.
started.
Well, the issue is like, yeah, you're like really morally loading all of these things.
But
well, hold on.
Yeah.
I gotta be allowed to
That's
respond
fine.
at some point, right? You are morally loading this, but like suffering matters a lot, right? This idea,
Yes, it does.
even Christianity doesn't really have this idea that death and killing is the ultimate greatest evil. It seems like the greatest evil is probably blaspheming the Holy Spirit and something
Don't
like
fear who can kill the body, who can kill the soul.
yeah, and something, yeah, and the deaths of souls, right?
Sure.
The impugnation that happens in a person's being and psyche as they fall further and further away from Christ. That's probably like the greatest evil, right? And so even you would grant me that there are times where we obviously justify killing people, even maybe people that don't necessarily deserve it, because you're for the Crusades, right? You're for holy wars, even though the wars were driven by Christians.
I am not in
first.
favor of directly killing human beings.
So
I'm only in favor
The
of
Christians who participated in the Crusades were wrong. The knights who killed the Muslims.
if they engaged in unjust wars. But if you are engaged, the point is, if you are in a just war for a good cause that satisfies just war criteria.
Sure, yeah. So this is to my point. My point is not that. My point is actually there are going to be times and places where we do justify the killing of other people. We just do. We do this all the time.
But I don't do that when they're not holding a weapon in their hand.
Well,
When they're
in the
just
case of
when they're
invading,
just your sick relative.
well, when they've taken over like Constantinople or Jerusalem, for example, they might just be like vibing and chilling there for a while. I imagine we probably.
But we were
killed
talking
plenty
about
of
we were
people.
talking about euthanasia. We're talking about our sick relatives
Well, we're
who have
talking
not
about
captured
death.
Constantinople.
Well, the principle.
No, my principle is innocent. Let's just start with innocent people. We don't directly kill innocent people. You said, well, if they're really sick, we agree with their assessment that their life is not worth living.
Yep.
But my problem with that is
The difference between now and their death is nothing but suffering.
You are
Yeah.
going, but here's the thing. You're going to be inconsistent or subjective in where you draw the line. Because let's say, for example, a quadriplegic.
I won't be inconsistent. Will it be subjective? Potentially, but that doesn't make things
Can
necessarily
a
inconsistent.
20-year-old quadriplegic choose assisted suicide?
Probably not, no.
They could have 60 years of suffering.
Almost all the evidence shows that most people that experience like quadriplegia, for example, because as long as there's not like great amounts of pain associated with it, have like pretty normalized happiness.
So you're going to tell them if they say to you, I'm miserable and I want to die, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Well, why can't I say that to someone who's dying of cancer and has 6 months left to live? Yeah.
Because the difference is that when you look at the individual...
You're allowed to tell them they're
Can I
wrong. I'm
respond?
not. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, why? You're doing the slippery thing.
What do you
now.
mean, why?
You're acting as though we're doing the same thing. I'm like basically rule for me and not for thee. But I have a very specific reason as to why this may or not be allowed, which is suffering. If you have somebody at a 4th stage of cancer, have you ever watched somebody go through 4th stage cancer?
Not personally.
Okay. It's horrifying. They slowly sink into their body. They are filled with pain to the point that the only way we can help them manage is basically making them barely conscious most of the time. It's awful. And I think that if there's a point in time, like when I look at my husband's grandmother, when she said she wanted to go home to die in dignity, that's what her words were. Catholic lady as well, by the way. She wanted to go home and not drink or eat and die because she knew she was going to. She had just had a stroke. She could barely move, right? There was no hope of recovery. She was like 86. There isn't really any good empirical evidence that there's high hope of recovery of her getting her body back. And her body was degrading over time, and she already had a number of ailments coming into it. What she had to look forward to was being unconscious, in the hospital, poked and prodded and in pain until she expired, which is exactly what she got to experience. That is very different than the empirical things that we can assess and know about the experience of a quad. And that's the difference that I'm making. It is an empirical testable,
But in Canada,
knowable claim.
you can apply for assisted suicide for these permanent kinds of
I
disabilities.
didn't say I'm for all elements of Canada assisted policy.
Okay, good.
Assisted suicide. Like, for example...
But the problem is it becomes a slippery slope when you start to allow these
It
other
becomes
cases.
a slippery slope mostly because nobody's brave enough to have the conversation to figure out what the actual specific line is. And I think the line should be the consent of the individual and the empirical evidence to align with their assessment of their future of suffering. And if the evidence is there, yes, you're going to be in pain and barely conscious until you die. Yes, we should give them the dignity. In the same way we let elders jump off of cliffs back in the day so that they could be saved of the indignity and pain and suffering of their death. We just like allowed these things. And I think some of these things are okay, just in a modern version of it.
No, and I think that when a society is more comfortable allowing people, especially the elderly, to kill themselves to not be a burden, they have failed.
I didn't say about a burden. That's not what I'm interested in.
But
because that's not my line.
But you gave the example of people being in the past being okay with old people jumping off a cliff or putting them on the ice sheet and sending them away.
Sure. Well, I said in modern times, because my line here isn't the burden; it's suffering and consent.
No, it's the individual choosing.
It's two things.
Okay.
Because it's not just the individual choosing. I've clarified that.
But why should an individual be allowed to choose to end their own life just because they want to?
Because I think they have a life worth living, and that they'll be convinced of that typically pretty quickly. Most cases I've worked with a lot of unaliving patients.
So you're okay with restricting individual choices, even if the person wants to? Because
when have I ever said I'm a liberty maximalist?
Because it causes people harm. No, I'm just trying to assess your worldview.
Well, the issue is what in this conversation has made you to even suspect that I wouldn't be a liberty maximalist? Like, why would you even think that would be my position based on everything that I've said?
I don't know, because you're all over the place on the different issues. I'm not
all over the place. I'm extremely consistent.
Well, no, because it's hard. You will take, for example, what matters is somebody's ensouled, but then it's okay to kill them if they consent to it, but not if they consent to it and they don't have a good reason for doing it. So there's all these markers that see added on.
Can choose to die, and that we can align and agree with the dignity of that choice because of the future that we know that they're
going to have. And I think that anybody choosing suicide, we should treat all of them the same and help them out of that decision.
Well, that's the issue. That's totally fine that you.
I'm not going to make a judgment. Some people's lives aren't worth living.
That's totally fine. The thing that's happening here that I think I'm getting frustrated by is I'm willing to engage with your idea and go, I think some of your arguments are totally reasonable and sound. So are mine. And instead, what you're doing is you're kind of strawmanning me increasingly, and then saying, well, that's ridiculous. And it's like, well, yeah, the strawman is ridiculous, but those aren't my positions. The positions that I have are logical. They are sound. You disagree with them because there are certain qualia of moral principle hierarchies.
I still don't understand your position on abortion, because you're saying, because I said we agreed ensoulment didn't matter. It was having
we did not agree with that. Ensoulment does matter.
Okay, but you said ensoulment wasn't related to the question of legally conferring the right to life.
In the context of like judicial law.
Yes, of course. Like the law that it's wrong to kill a human being either after birth or before birth. And what I asked for, what is the standard for determining the conferral of the right to life? Like, who is the proper recipient of that right?
Right now, for me, it is ensoulment as evidenced by a complex enough brain activity to suggest that consciousness is possible. Because obviously, in development, their consciousness could break down and no consciousness would be possible. And probably that child would be miscarried.
Do you mean possible in the near sense? Like you could be conscious in 5 minutes?
No, I only care about the time present now, not in the future.
What does consciousness mean?
I typically point to, so when there's 5 major divisions of the brain, this is like neuroscience, so I'm not talking about the lobes. A lot of people get confused. I think it's not the lobes. There are mammals have 5 divisions, but lizards, for example, have 3 divisions of the brain in how they neuroanatomically develop. So they have all 5 divisions of the brain, which are necessary for a human brain, and there is sufficient brain activity in that fetus's brain that we go, yes, that brain is operational, functional, and exists as like the closest approximation to what we know human brains operate and exist as.
Here's my problem with your position. If the conferral of the right to life is based on the present capacity of consciousness,
yes,
as you've defined it, it will lead to one of either 2 unacceptable outcomes. Either the standard will be so low that many mammals will pass the test, even rodents like rats, for example, pigs, that we'll say, oh, they have consciousness. They have
I don't think we know if animals have consciousness in the way that humans do.
Well, who's more conscious? Who's more conscious? A rat that can solve a maze or a newborn infant?
Well, the rat is higher intelligence, but I don't think it's more conscious because the rat doesn't go, I think, therefore I am.
Neither does the newborn.
They do, to some extent. Well, they do. Like, for example, okay.
I'm not laughing at you. I've just had 3 children. I laugh at the idea of a newborn Dakar.
So you'll know about this. There's a really cool study. When you take a bunch of rats and you show them a paradigm of puppet rats playing with each other, and one of the rats is mean to the other rat, and one of the rats is nice to that same rat. Do you know if rats, like infant rats, show a preference?
I didn't say infant rats, I said fully grown rats. You don't have to.
Regardless,
it's not 1-to-1.
Sure. Let's say fully grown rats.
I do not know if rats can do the empathy thing here. I know that older children can.
No, children as young as we can possibly test it for can.
But not for newborns.
Yes, newborns are we can't test until about 4 months because their eyes are so undeveloped that we can't know what exactly they're orienting at. But the youngest we can possibly reasonably test for a moral view of essentially treat others well exists in 4-month-olds.
That's not necessarily consciousness. For example, many animals can pass the mirror.
Well, it might not be, but it's for sure evidence of insolement because that child is orienting towards
Well, why
morality.
wouldn't we say mammals that can pass the mirror test and can identify that there's a
because
dot on
you can train
their...
mammals on a mirror test, and I don't care about identity. That's an identity question.
How is identity not related to consciousness?
Because it's possible that something can be conscious and not have a strong sense of identity. Ask anybody, for example, who's had a left parietal stroke.
My problem here, once again, you're using the label conscious to say, okay, that's where you have a right to life.
Well, what's consciousness? Can you define it?
I differ consciousness from sentience. Sentience is awareness of the outside world and bodily sensation, light, dark, heat, cold, pain, pleasure. Consciousness is having rational reflection that goes beyond, and a sense of self that goes beyond what non-human animals are capable of. It's a distinctly human ability that does not exist in humans until
crows are
at
very
least...
rational.
What?
Crows are very rational, because then by your logic, crows are conscious?
I would not say that they're conscious, no. That they have an internal sense of monologue.
But that's because I would say morality is the key thing of consciousness here for me. And so as young as we can possibly test, 4-month-old infants seem to have a sense of morality. At least you ought not treat people poorly. And if I see somebody treating another poorly, I don't like that.
That doesn't mean that they think I ought not do that. They just see something that scares them. Just like if a dog saw another dog being beaten up, they might be scared. Well, that might happen to me, and I don't like that. Or they might. So I don't like this thing out here.
You don't think that we have morals kind of inborn into us?
I think we do, but there's a capacity for them.
I agree that there's a capacity.
I believe
for
the
them,
capacity.
But you're in my position now. Yes, the unique thing about human beings is our ability to engage with morality, and as early as we can test, infants have very rudimentary but moral systems that dogs do not.
And my position would be this: that you could do tests to see rational and possibly even moral behavior in non-human animals, but those non-human animals are not persons with a right to life. However, among all humans having an equal right to life, and that would be another problem. Do we have an equal right to life, an equal basic rights? Well, if our rights are contingent on a property that comes in degrees, like moral awareness or consciousness, there's no ground for it being an equal right. And there's going to be some humans that completely lack it, like a newborn infant or a 9-month-old. I mean, do you think a 20-week-old fetus, they don't have moral awareness, they have the division in their brains, but I would say that they're a person because they will eventually develop distinctly human capacities long after birth.
Sure.
But that's also true of every unborn embryo and fetus.
Yes, that is true of every unborn
And that is where I ground their rights in.
The future like ours. I understand, but I'm not interested.
Not future like ours. It's just that they have this capacity to develop is indicative
potential.
of their human nature.
Yes, their potential, right? The thing that I'm saying here is that, again, their human nature is complicated because, again, into biology, we know that basically, we can print organs. We can probably clone humans now because we've cloned animals. We just don't for good ethical reasons, because there is this major question of what is that clone? Are they ensouled? Are they truly human?
Are you talking about
in the
cloning
moral
humans
way?
or cloning animals?
Humans. Yeah, we don't clone humans for ethical reasons.
There's
right?
also commercialization that if you're and that's why I'm also against things like commercial surrogacy.
There are other things, but before we go off, would you grant me that the main reason that we don't clone humans is ethical concerns, because we don't know what that being is?
Yeah, well, not that we don't know what the being is, but that human life is such a sacred thing to take, and this is something that even secular people can at least recognize, to take it outside of the act designed to create human beings. It's a very risky, it's just a dangerous and immoral thing to do.
Sure.
But we would know that it's a member of the human species.
Does it go to heaven or hell?
It's a human organism. Yeah, it's a human being.
But does it have a soul that can go to heaven or hell? A clone. Does my clone have a soul?
Yes. It's the same. It's the same as if you were like identical twins are kind of like clones. Like you could have an embryo and then it splits 14 days later. It doesn't mean that the twin doesn't have a soul.
Did God put one soul or two in there?
Unless it's the evil twin.
Well, did God put one soul or two souls in there?
That's when we're not sure.
Exactly.
But we can know that's a human being and we ought not directly kill them.
Just to pause you. That's the point I'm making, is that we don't know what about the soul. It's hard to know. And so you hedge it as conservative as possible, right at conception. And I think that that's fine for you to do. But I think there's a lot of problems that you run into with that logic. Like, is there one or two souls at conception? Does that mean that God is dooming up to 50% of all human souls to never live? Why?
Why?
That seems
Are you
very
saying because of
strange.
miscarried children?
Yeah.
Well, no, I
Well,
don't.
if a soul begins at conception.
Yeah, sure. Because here's my argument that 1,000 years ago, and in many rural areas today around the world, child mortality is 50%. Half of all children will not survive past the age of 5. And that was true throughout most of human history.
But God designed our bodies, and God designed the woman's body insofar as almost 50% just don't even make
God
it
also
at all.
designed the world too. And
Well,
it's
I would argue
it's a
that
hazardous
disease-
it's a hazardous place
Well,
we
do you
live
think
in.
that disease is God designed, or that it's like a state of fallen nature?
Well, I think that the fact that the womb is incapable of supporting human life is probably, in many cases, that's also an aspect of fallen human nature. My point is just that you brought up an example. Well, there's a high how can we say that all these embryos have souls when they have a 50% mortality rate? Well, by that logic, a 4-year-old medieval child has a 50% mortality rate. It doesn't mean he doesn't have a soul.
Well, these are pretty different, right? In one
No,
case,
they're
the
both human
child is
beings.
dying as a result of the fallen state of nature of man, causing disease or infirmness. Or in the other case, it's literally just it's a physical issue of women's bodies. Like this isn't.
And our bodies have been corrupted because of the fall. Yeah.
So just all women's bodies, because this is not like, it's not like some women miscarry and other women just never do. Almost all women will miscarry most of the time because we don't know about it.
Human death was never a part of God's plan. So if we had not fallen, there would not be miscarriages.
So God built our body before the fallen state, right?
Right. But then after Adam and Eve fell, we have corrupted human natures, which is why we and our
So
children
did
die.
Eve's uterus change before or after corrupt? Did it change?
Her whole human nature and Adam's
But her
changed.
biology literally changed.
It
The way
had
that
to, because
ovaries,
Adam and Eve would not
fallopian
have. They would not have died in the garden. So their biology changed in some way.
Okay.
What's
your
that would be the
evidence for
same.
that?
That God said you will not die.
God
and
said.
then they ate the fruit, and
Yeah.
then they died.
A dogma, which is fine.
Well, I believe that. That's what God revealed, and you believe that too.
Of course. So again, the point that I'm making here is not that you can't have rational answers for what you're saying. My point is that when you keep scoffing at my position and acting like it's not reasonable or incoherent, as
No,
I
I just
think you've
disagree.
suggested,
I disagree with your position.
disagreeing is totally fine. Painting my position as inconsistent or incoherent is not fine because it's neither of these things.
No, I said it leads
Trent,
to back.
before I have you respond, let me just we have 3 chats coming
right.
through. Quick reminder, guys, now would be a good time if you want to send something in. As a reminder, $10 display. You can do that either via Streamlabs or YouTube Super Chat. $99 read. You can do that through Streamlabs or YouTube Super Chat. We have via Streamlabs, Flavius here has a message coming in here. Trent, this Adderall sniffer, or don't shoot the messenger, orbiting around
Wait,
Destiny.
why wouldn't I shoot the next? Why are you reading this?
Whoa, what do you mean?
Do you think it's true that I'm an Adderall sniffer? Why are you reading this?
What do you mean? Why am I?
Well,
reading
it's
it?
a very strange thing to do, right?
What?
Well, you're saying it's not me, but you're reading it. You want me to sit
Somebody
here,
sent in he sent in a $200 thing. What?
but you don't hold that position.
I think he's just reading. I think the policy is if someone
read
pays the
the-
money,
I
he reads the
understand
chat.
what the policy
Whoa,
is. This is
hey.
like one of my issues, though, is coming on this
whoa,
thing.
hey.
People pay to abuse me. That's what's happening.
Well,
right
people,
now.
come on.
I mean,
Have a thicker skin. Come on, this is.
I have an extremely thick skin. I get death threats. I've been swatted. I have
I think,
extremely thick skin.
it's not that deep.
I think it's reason.
It's not that deep.
It's reasonable for me to point out, Brian, that on your show you are having people pay to come in and abuse me, which obviously Trent doesn't want to do.
Hey, hold on, abuse.
Adderall sniffing.
Hey, come on, let's not do the thing where it's like, somebody you stubbed your toe and you got abused by the table.
Is that what I'm doing?
well,
I don't think.
I think
this-
it goes above the level of it's a kind of it's a malicious or false insult. It's calumny. It's not just like
It's not abuse though. Hold on, abuse
okay.
is.
Would it be okay if
it's-
I said really malicious and mean? Is that okay?
it is
I
malicious.
wouldn't say really malicious. I'll give you slightly, maybe
It's definitely
a little
not slightly. They spent $200 to be malicious.
Well, look, let me
so
finish.
it's pretty
How about-
malicious.
Gosh, I could have.
Well, look,
So
I could
malicious they want
I
me
could
to
have
sit
bought
here through
8
this.
malaria nets. I could have bought 8 Yeah, I do. I mean, that could have bought 8
Well, here,
malaria
let
nets.
me look. Some of the comments also haven't. I don't think it's just directionally towards you.
I just don't appreciate
They've
when you pretend as though you're agnostic when you're you're personally benefiting entirely off of your
Well, I mean,
it's not that deep.
It is,
malicious.
but to be
It's not
fair,
that
though,
deep.
it's his show, and we stepped into the arena.
Absolutely,
not
absolutely.
that deep.
I'm fine with all
And
that.
I've come to accept
it drives
that
me
this is-
crazy when Brian pretends to be
Look,
look, it's not me. It's not me. You sure about
I
that?
think you're overthinking this, Kyla, a little bit.
I'm not overthinking.
The
this.
thing-
I think
I've
he
been on
would.
the show
I think he
many
would read a
times.
comment if it was mean to him.
Yeah, of
Oh,
course.
trust me, they call me fat. They call me all kinds of terrible things. It is what it is. Anyways, here, well, look, let's not get into a meta discussion over
Read your comment.
these things. I'll read it and
That's your 200.
hey, Kyla, relax.
It's
All
really
right.
simple, right? You're getting your 200.
Trent, this Adderall sniffer. See, now I had to repeat it twice. You could have just let me get through
I want
the
you to
thing.
sit in the discomfort.
I'm
of
going to have to
reading
pull it
twice.
up a third time now.
Okay.
Orbiting around destiny is the exact type of Christian trying to subvert Christianity. If she's a Christian, then I'm the Pope abolishing Vatican II and the filioque.
Filioque.
Filioque. excuse
Trent,
me.
what does the Bible say about talking about people's salvation? Do you know?
Talking about their salvation.
Saying, for example, if I insisted you were not saved, what does it say about Christians doing that to one another?
Well, Jesus said, "Do not judge by appearances, but judge rightly." So, like, we can judge. Like, if you literally were sniffing Adderall on the table, we could be like, "That's bad." But to say that without any evidence, that would be calumny, which we shouldn't do to people. We should critique people based on what we can observe. We could say, like, I think that your arguments that allow for legal abortion are incorrect
And unsatisfying to you.
morally bad because they lead to a very morally bad thing.
Sure.
And that they lead to consequences that I think are counterintuitive. The other thing I was saying about abortion too is, like, if I just went to somebody on the street, I like my position because I could ask them, hey, is it wrong to kill human beings, innocent human beings? They'd be like, yeah, it sure is. And I'd ask them, what's a human being? And then we get to chatting. They'd say, eventually they would see the most sensible definition is just a member of our species. And I think it would point them right away they should be really suspicious of abortion. And so that's where I think putting it in public
Christians should
policy
be
is very fair.
conservative as much as possible, right? This goes to my point of why Christians shouldn't be.
Do we have another chat?
But I'll start it and we'll come back to
start
it.
Start. Manic pedantic, if humans are the only biological organisms with inherent value, would you consider reverse xenotransplantation, human to animal, for the sake of the animal's health, immoral? Assume procedure is safe.
Like giving pigs human blood.
No, he's talking about the other way around. He's
Is
saying
he? I thought it was.
he said human to animal. Like,
Wouldn't that be human to animal? Like
he's saying if humans have intrinsic value, can humans donate their organs to save animals?
that's what I was saying. Yeah, can a human donate blood to a pig?
Yeah. Well, that gets into interesting ethical territory.
I have no problem with it. Our blood is not a soul.
I think that humans should, they can make sacrifices for animals. They should make irrational sacrifices.
Yeah.
So there might be cases where it's wrong.
And we have Frumpled Rabbit here. If you admit that it is wrong to kill an innocent, ensouled person, but also admit that you don't know the moment when the person gets ensouled, why would you ever say, I think it's okay to kill a possibly ensouled person, because you are not sure if they're ensouled or not?
At
Thank
a
you, Rabbit.
state level, I think that when the state operates on the most conservative policy possible, it breaks the state. And so what I want to see is an overall reduction of abortion, but also the negative sequelae associated with abortion, which is why I typically sit at around like 12 to 15 weeks, I think is reasonable to start making the arguments for maybe making it actually illegal if the woman is doing it outside of like medical necessity.
Yeah, and my response to that would be that tying ensoulment to brain development, at 12 weeks, the brain is far too small to exhibit any unique human behavior. So you're either going to have to give the right to life to mammals that have similar sized brains, or if you say it's because the brain will eventually get big enough for uniquely human behavior, that's also true of embryos and fetuses prior to that point.
No, it's a conservative answer of saying the moment at which the brain is operating as similar to a human as possible, we can probably presume that a soul is in there, which is kind of similar to like what Aquinas was doing with the 40-day ensoulment argument.
But he was following Aristotle's bad biology.
Well, he was also
on that.
following Exodus 21.
No, Exodus only deals with what if you accidentally cause a miscarriage. It doesn't say anything else. The fact that there are different kinds of punishments for different people. Like if you accidentally kill a slave in the Old Testament, you're not punished. But if you directly killed the slave, you could be put to death, or you could be severely punished. The translation's a little ambiguous.
Sure,
but the Old Testament doesn't have a description of a direct abortion, so we can't glean what the Old Testament morality
Exodus
on
21
that.
should never be presented as evidence for abortion.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Of course, I agree. But what it's actually presenting is God going, there are point in times in which the consequence of killing a child during this period of gestation versus this period has to be different. Maybe God just said it to them because of like functional. When I look at Exodus, I see a lot more practical logic and reason in there than God like ordaining didactic clause.
In numbers, you don't get counted in the census until you're 1 month old. And
Right,
that's
but
probably because of high infant mortality.
Of course. So we see God engaging, though, in such a way of going, okay, well,
I think he's more accommodating ancient Israelite attitudes
possibly,
than directly.
Possibly, but it's also
commanding
possible to
this.
suggest that God goes, okay, well, there are instances in which killing something, while it's always negative, which is my position as well, there are times where it is more permissible than other times.
You can't, no. All it would say is that the punishment for accidentally killing is going to vary, but direct killing is, basically always held as murder in the Old
Exodus
Testament.
21 is direct killing.
No, it's when two men struggle and then they hit a pregnant woman, and if she dies or the fetus dies, it's not direct killing. The Old Testament makes a difference between accidental killing, which would be that's an accidental case, and directly killing. If you directly kill somebody, life for life.
So if you hit a woman in the midst of an assault.
When two guys are fighting and the lady comes to break them up and she gets hit and she dies, or the fetus dies. Accidental death is just treated differently. We do the same with laws today.
But manslaughter in the Bible is still treated very differently than just a fine, right?
It depends.
You're right. Manslaughter is still treated
If you
differently.
accidentally kill a slave, it just says that the master has suffered the loss himself. He's not punished.
So do you
But
think
you
that
couldn't directly kill a slave.
Should manslaughter be tried the same as murder?
Where, today?
Yeah.
No, because we understand there's different circumstances involved in the accidental killing of humans versus purposeful. An abortion is purposeful.
Of course. Well, even in purposeful killings, we have other rulings on these sort of things, right?
Sure.
In the case of death penalty, right?
A little bit of a check-in here.
Or self-defense.
We're at the 20 minutes past the 2-hour mark.
I don't know. Was there anything? I mean, we can keep. I'm trying to think. Make sure I think we see our difference here on the issue where we have common ground. Like we both identify as Christians. We both believe in God. We believe in the Bible. We believe in Jesus. We believe God wants people to act in a certain way. Christian politicians should institute good laws.
Would you grant me? Let me see if you would grant me some of my worldview then.
We'll see. All right.
Okay. Would you agree that a lot of Protestants absolutely would like to establish policy that will go in the direction of a theocracy, such as repealing the 19th?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of them. One reason I am skeptical of full-blooded Christian nationalism, I know there's been arguments here on the podcast before that the states should get to have a state religion, even if the federal government doesn't have a federal one. Each state should do that.
And yet all states opted to not eventually.
I'm very skeptical about that because it hasn't worked out well for Catholics in history.
Or Protestants.
Well, especially for Catholics, though, they tend to be the minority in a Protestant country.
Well, there's been if you go to medieval Europe, it's arguably.
I'm talking about America. We're talking about America.
Okay, sure.
So in America, you have
Catholics were very persecuted.
In Oregon. There was a Supreme Court case saying whether the state could force Catholic kids to go to public school.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court said in Pierce versus Society of Sisters, no, you can't force them to do that. Because public schools then were Protestant schools.
Yeah, I think Massachusetts, when I was researching for this, I found this crazy case in Massachusetts, I believe, where it was illegal basically to be a Catholic priest. They could arrest you.
It's called the Popish Act.
Yes, and then if those people escaped and came back, it was justification to kill them.
Yeah.
And in Massachusetts, 4 Quaker priests, I don't know if they call them priests or what they call
pastors,
them.
probably.
Pastors. 4 Quaker pastors were actually killed.
I am for people having the freedom to practice their religion within limits, but I also recognize Catholicism is true, and so I think society can, in very soft ways, point people towards that which is true. Now, in hard cases, I think the law should mostly be used to keep people from gravely harming others or gravely harming themselves. So I think there's a good case to be made that the state should outlaw online gambling.
But you also want to ban contraception.
Or let's take things that I think are more, or take adult pornography, explicit content, at the very least, the state should require rigorous age verification.
Sure, it's just so easy to bypass.
I don't know. Well, the P-Hub website doesn't work in Texas because it has age verification. There's
Everyone
a lot
just uses other.
Well, but the point is, like, but there are sites that
porn
don't
sites.
where
Yeah,
there are many sites that are shut down because they won't comply with age verification.
Yes, the issue is like all that happens then is that you have the same, and so this is going.
But
back
you can put up the same with, but the same you could do the same for online gambling. But we could say, hey, this really harms people. It's an addictive vice. It's bad when people have unfettered access to it. So I think I am in favor of the state mostly using its power to promote Christian virtue to prevent grave harms. I think it can also be helpful if the state, like ideally, I think you could have a Christian state that doesn't oppress people. Yeah, it has different religions, but
theoretically,
but the holidays are actually holy days. You get the Christian holy days off.
Theoretically, of course, theoretically, this
because
is
it
possible.
promotes it as the state religion while accepting there's pluralism.
Well, I would probably still refute that because I'm very concerned about what happens to a religion when it is blended with a state. I think it corrupts it.
I love getting more days off, though. So let's just
Sure, but you can get days off. But again, of course, Christians can engage politically. Of course, Christians can vote on what they feel as Christians are voted for. What they cannot do is make laws where the only justification that they can point to for that law is the Bible says so.
And I'm okay.
And if you grant me that, then that's the Christian nationalism I'm talking about that is rampant in North America. And then we just need a new word for Christians like you who are just being like, can't we just like be Christians and have our ethics and vote based on what we think is right and good? Of course, you should do whatever you want as a voter.
But I'm going stronger, though, to say that Christians have a moral duty to shape the state so that grave evils are avoided or ameliorated.
So shape the state insofar as
to vote to ban slavery,
but also using logic and argumentation to convince non-Christians.
Because
to
I believe
positions.
there's four kinds of laws. So there's eternal law, that's God's mind saying here's how the universe should be.
Yeah.
There's natural law, which is when rational creatures participate in that. We use reason to be like, oh, God made the world and it should be this way. We can look at our bodies, we can look at the world, it should be going this way. Natural law, we could see that. Then there is positive law. So, God didn't reveal in the Bible what the speed limit should be. We kind of have to deliberate.
It's pretty amoral too.
Well, it's not amoral because if you didn't have any speed limits, a lot of bad things would happen. You could say it's immoral.
Well, bad things happening doesn't mean something immoral is happening, right?
Not necessarily, but if you could intervene to prevent the bad things with a simple law, it could be immoral that you failed to intervene.
Maybe, but you just have to make the logical case for it. And that's all I'm saying.
But it's not in the Bible. It's not in natural law. We have to use prudence to arrive at that.
Yeah, Christians would have to convince me.
You have positive laws, and then you've got ecclesial laws, divine law. So you have divine law, too. Like, for example, worshiping on Sunday. That's not in the natural law. Like that's an artifact of history based on Jesus rising from the dead and God communicating to people, I want you to worship on this day.
Yeah.
And so because it's a part of divine law, which is funny, do you know the National Sunday Law conspiracy?
No.
So Seventh-day Adventists for a long time have said there is a giant conspiracy for Catholics to take over the government and make everyone worship on Sunday and put people to death if they worship on Saturday.
Okay.
So it's their conspiracy addlebrains thinking that's going to happen. I'm like, we got a lot more to deal with in the Catholic Church right now than if we're going to pass a law. There's a lot of other things down the list we want to get to.
Sure.
So I'm not going to make people worship on Sunday or go to church or follow the divine law.
But you might
but there's clear things in
common law illegal.
And common law what?
Common law living together.
Oh, I might make it illegal? No, because there are some things that you can recognize, like the natural law, you can tell that.
Civil unions between gay men.
The natural law, you can see there are things that are wrong that are minor evils, like breaking a promise. Like you promise to do something and you fudge on the promise. I'm going to help you move. And I knew it was lying when I said that, and then I don't show up and leave you in a lurch. That's immoral. We can know from reason you shouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. Am I going to make a law about it? No, probably not. Just figure it out amongst yourselves. So it has to be a grave enough evil to justify the weight of the law stepping in.
I think that's a totally
and for me, the grave enough evils would especially be directly killing innocent human beings.
Then make the case to secular people so they agree with you, and then pass it on.
I am doing that.
I know you are. I think this is why I'm saying I'd like maybe for us to find different words, because when I'm talking about Christian nationalism, what I'm not talking about is Catholics and Christians who feel some sort of way for sound reason, both from their religion and from logic, why they feel some sort of way.
And here's the thing. When it comes to abortion,
if I could finish
go ahead. Yes,
go ahead. What I am saying is that if you want to do things like ban porn, and your reason for it is, well, the Bible says so, and you mostly have to post hoc other stuff, or you have to be like, well, there's lots of these like negative sequelae, and it's like, well, as we said, negative sequelae is insufficient to ban certain things, because we have to look at whether or not banning it has other worse negative sequelae, right? In the case of drugs, okay, alcohol is legal, even though addiction is awful.
Right, banning it causes more harm. Well,
more harm.
You know what though? During
Yes.
Prohibition, the per capita drinking rate was actually prior to Prohibition was 3 times higher than it is today.
Yeah, but you also saw an explosion of mafia activity.
Sure,
That's
but it
typically why
wasn't
we
a
make these
totally
policies.
outlandish thing to do, because drunkenness was a problem then that was a scale we'd be totally unfamiliar with today.
I didn't say that it was outlandish to do.
Yeah.
I actually said what the state did was the reasonable thing, right? What the state goes
And then
is
you saw it didn't
moral
work.
issue is X.
And they also wanted tax revenue.
right? And so
that was the other reason. They wanted tax
state
revenue.
generally stays agnostic and reactive to moral issue X. We say it's bad to kill fetuses in the womb, and the state goes, it could be. It's definitely possible that it could be. But if we start seeing a whole bunch of causes that are outcome from problem X, moral issue X, whatever it is, then we make a policy based on analysis and consensus, which is how the state should work. And my argument is Christian nationalists want to upend this. They want to say moral issue X, so we ought to do the most conservative thing, and they don't do any retroactive analysis of the outcomes, because the moral thing is what matters the most, and only the moral thing. And that's not how statescraft works.
I agree and disagree. So I agree with you that some Christian nationalists who are far Protestant, sola scriptura, well, I want all the laws to reflect the Bible, that bites them in the butt, because the Bible doesn't have an explicit prohibition on abortion. It doesn't have an explicit prohibition on pornography. In fact, the reason Protestants were late to banning abortion, I did an episode of my podcast called When Protestants Were Pro-Choice, that back in the 60s and 70s, even the Southern Baptists were moderately pro-choice because they couldn't get from the Bible, we need to outlaw all of this. So, and the same thing with things like pornography, is not directly in there.
Yeah.
So for me, as a Catholic, I would say, the reason I'm going to pass laws is only from those things where the natural law informs us in ways that I could communicate it to any person,
Practical
even
logic.
if they don't believe with my divine law.
Perfect.
And that's fine.
That's totally
But
good with
where I disagree though is I'm not going to approach issues and say, well, I'm not going to approach it this way. Enslaving people is bad, and we're going to have a debate about the practical effects of freeing slaves or not freeing slaves.
Well, the
And
rhetoric
I'm
we
going to
can
say
talk about.
enslaving people is wrong, and it ought not happen. So it's not killing fetuses are bad. For me, it's killing human beings is wrong. And in some cases, you're allowed to start with the moral principle and the sequelae or whatever
I never
follows.
said that you can't start with them.
Yeah.
In fact, even the
I
state...
want to start with that.
Even the state starts with the moral principle.
Yeah.
The state just goes agnostic as to the outcomes and what to do about it. But if the outcomes are so sufficient, even if the outcomes is people feel so morally repulsed by this that they just want to do away with it, then the state should do away with it, right? That's all I'm asking
So would you be
for.
okay, though, with outlawing abortion if it turned out, hypothetically, maternal mortality rates and child mortality rates? The adoption one, I don't think that shouldn't really factor in, because you're going to expect if abortion is outlawed, some children will be placed for adoption. But it's still, that's better than being killed. But the mortality rates, let's say the mortality rates did not go up. Would you
What
say...
about poverty rates and everything? Because it's not just mortality rates. It's mother and fetus mortality. It's poverty. It's being put into foster care and child abuse. It's all of these sequelae.
Right.
So you're making a world where none of those things go up.
We'll start there as a hypothetical.
Sure. If we started in this hypothetical magical world, I'd probably be much more open to it.
Then we
It
just turn
isn't real.
but then there's going to come a point, I'm sure, where we turn the dial. If it only goes up by 0.5%, it's still justified to save all these children.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like it's just, for you, it's the dial will eventually get turned to a point. I don't feel like it's worth it.
It's two things. One, I am not compelled by the Catholic or Christian argument that ensolement begins at conception. We didn't get a ton into it. I don't actually find it very satisfying, right? Number two, the sequelae associated with these policies are unbearable, and I see better policy to drive down abortion so that we can remove all tragedy, not just this one specific tragedy.
Yeah, and my position is just, if you believe in the proposition it is wrong to directly kill innocent members of the human species, it's going to logically entail you should be against abortion. And I think many people hold that position but have not applied it to the issue of abortion.
Well, again, because people just differ, because everyone has to deal with the trolley problem and go, Okay, yeah, obviously this is silly, right? And the trolley problem, as I'm sure you've experienced it a bunch, is obviously you have...
Yeah, there's always people peeing on the trolley in San Diego. Sorry, no, you mean the other one.
There's, a 2-week-old embryo fetus on one side, and there is an infant on the other side, and you have to pick one that's being saved. Who are you picking? And every single time, people always pick the infant, of course, right? And the reason why, and then we go, well, why? Because the whole point of the trolley problem is the why. And people give a whole bunch, some of it's emotivist. Babies can cry and it makes me feel sad. Or some people, I've heard certain abortion positions where they're like, well, the baby looks the most like me, so I feel the most compelled toward it. There's a whole bunch of reasons. But one of the biggest things that it belies to us is going, it's obvious that we are treating these two things differently. It's obvious that this is the case. And so because we understand that the death of a 2-week-old embryo, while tragic, may be less tragic than a 1-year-old dying, because we understand that, we might go, well, the death of a 2-week-old embryo might be less tragic.
I can solve the problem.
Hold on.
Sure, go ahead, finish up, and I can solve it.
The death of a 2-week-old embryo may be less tragic than all of the sequelae associated from a woman being banned from abortion.
Okay. The problem is solved in this way. All people are affected by death equally and unequally. So an act can affect people, a group of people, in an equal way and an unequal way.
But you have to choose it.
No, let me finish. All right, so for example, if I went to an opera and I released a gas that made people tone deaf, it would affect everyone in the theater the same way. They lose the ability to sing. But that would more gravely affect an opera singer than a regular person because they rely on that more. So death affects all people equally in the sense that they no longer have life. But it will be more gravely harmful to some people whose lives had more instrumental value, for example. So the trolley problem, I could change it this way.
Why does the 2-week-old embryo have less instrumental value than the 1-year-old baby?
Because people will have things like more emotional attachment, or 2-week-old embryos typically have a very high mortality rate, so they might not continue. There's a 50% chance they might die.
Pop it?
No, there's a 50%. Let me finish. Because you could change the trolley problem. What if you just did this way? You have a 90-year-old homeless man who has no friends or family and a father of 10. Okay, 100% of people are going to save the father of 10.
Of course. The issue is...
But that doesn't mean it should be legal to kill the homeless man.
Nobody's saying... Sure. The issue is, what we're talking about here is that there is necessarily at the theoretical level, we understand that these things are weighted differently.
Sure.
For example, how many 2-week-old embryos need to be on one side of a track before you pick them over the infant?
Sure. I think also...
How many?
How many? I don't know. Not sure. But
I think that's the problem.
But let me change the example.
If it's just a little bit less instrumentally valuable, shouldn't it just be 2? Because now it's 2 people dying instead of 1. But that's not a satisfying answer for anyone either.
I think also the thought experiment, we have to be careful about thought experiments becoming intuition pumps. That they are structured in a way to lead us to a certain outcome.
Yeah, like the blue and red button. For sure. I don't think that this one is an intuition
Let me
pump.
change it a little. When we say embryo, we are accustomed to dealing directly with infants or observing them directly much more than in fact, 2-week embryos, we don't even see them on ultrasounds. Mm-hmm. We don't directly deal with them, so they're foreign to us. And so we're less likely to be emotionally attached to them. But suppose on the track, let's say you have an infant, and then on the other side of the track, you have 2 brain-dead pregnant women with 8-week-old fetuses. So they're 2 brain-dead 8-week pregnant women.
So we've got 8 weeks versus what's on the other side again?
1 infant and 2 brain-dead pregnant women.
Oh, I'm picking the infant every time. I don't actually, I don't know how many embryos need to exist at 2 weeks old before I pick them over the baby. I think the answer might be, I don't know if I ever pick them over the baby. I think I pick the baby even if there's 1,000 2-week-old embryos.
But for example, let's say it's a man and there's an infant that is a stranger to him, and it's his brain-dead pregnant wife carrying his child who's 2 weeks old. He very well is probably going to choose the embryo in that case.
That's totally fine.
Because he has emotional attachment.
Because he has, yeah, of course, everyone always picks their own family. But at state level policy, we're not talking about whether or not you give up your son to save the whole world, right? What we're talking about is what is the most reasonable thing to incur upon the populace at a state level that leads to the most good outcomes, including both moral conduct and behavior, right? Reducing tragedy tragedy is the goal. Because if we both grant that abortions are tragedies, right? Whatever is going on, that a woman is choosing an abortion, it is always a bad situation.
But I would say if you did 3 or 4, if you did multiple brain dead pregnant, because when you sit in the situation that you have a pregnant woman here, which is
she's brain dead, so to me that's not like,
the reason I did that is because you want to focus on the unborn child, but unborn children.
Yeah, but I'm definitely very consistent. So like I think brain dead people have lost their soul. I don't care about unplugging them.
Because I said so
I don't care that there's two brain dead women.
No, then explain this though. If you did the trolley experiment and it was 5, 10, let's say it was 10 brain dead women.
Sure, but
and
you
one,
tried to...
let me finish.
Okay.
10 brain dead women and 1 infant. Everyone will choose the infant. No one will have any deliberation about it, right?
Because of the intuition pump. Yeah, I understand.
But if you say they're brain dead pregnant women and you stipulate the pregnancy will continue, people will deliberate, right?
I agree because
so
of the
there's a difference
pumping.
there.
I agree. So that's you pointing out that these trolleys can intuition pump. And what I would say to you is, you're right. There's all these plebs. They can't think past silly stuff. But me and you were based, rational, logical people. And I can look at this and go, well, I already grant that a brain dead woman is not sold. I don't care about that. I don't view that as a life anymore.
Well,
all we're actually comparing
I agree that they're dead.
Is zygotes, right? And so even when you try to intuition pump, I can just maintain.
I'm not pumping. That's where embryos live.
No. Just to be clear, that's not an accusation. You were when I say you tried to intuition pump in the opposite direction of my trolley did.
Okay.
Even in that case, I can engage with it with my ration and logic because I'm a based Phil bro, and you are too. Which is why even in my trolley problem, despite me potentially intuition pumping it, you can still process it through too, which is why I say how many zygotes, how many 2-week developed children, I guess maybe in your world, does there have to be on the other side before you pick them over the infant? And I think the fact that most Christians, including yourself, go, I don't know, is super valid. And it goes to my point of going, then it's not just about those lives, because if it's just about those lives, it should be
I think it was something you brought up earlier. If they have a 50% mortality rate, then a significant number of them are not going to actually survive anyways, whereas this infant could live a very long life. And so we're choosing between how many years
with a disease that makes it that there's like a 50% chance that they might die in the next year. But if they get through the next year, they'll be good to go.
And I think we should also stipulate that they're sleeping or they're comatose or they won't feel anything. I worry though that these kinds of, it's dangerous to use these sorts of thought experiments to say, oh, this is the thing that will point us to know if certain human beings or persons or not. For example, in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, there's Huck is talking to Aunt Polly, and he's talking about a steamboat that exploded. And Aunt Polly says to him, did anybody get hurt? And Huck says, nah, just a couple of N-words. And then Aunt Polly says, oh, good. People sometimes get hurt when these things happen. Because 150, but notice the intuition there. Black people aren't really people. And I'm sure if you did the trolley problem 150 years ago, they would probably, even good, decent people who want to end slavery would run over black people to save a white person they're connected to. All that would show is that their intuitions have been poisoned by a policy that dehumanizes this group. I think that has happened with the unborn because we have grown up in a society where it's legal to end their lives.
Are you poisoned by it? Because it was you who failed to answer the hypothetical.
I am conditioned by it because if I truly thought about the thousands of unborn children who are killed every day, if I truly thought about the injustices in the world, I couldn't function. I would just be rolled up in a ball, like crying my eyes out.
Sure,
we have to deaden ourselves to a lot of these things.
Sure, but the issue is that I agree. None of this is a rebuttal to saying, why wouldn't your answer just be 2 zygotes? Because that's 2 human lives over 1 baby. I feel like that by itself, done.
2 of them? I don't know, because you might say...
That's to my point. That's what I'm saying. And I think it's fine that you're saying, I don't know. I'm not going to like Wilson you and like try to embarrass you and be like, you're so fucking stupid. Me, I win. That's actually to my point of saying this stuff is really complicated. This stuff is actually hard to know. And I understand certain people's predilection to be hesitant of these hypotheticals because of the problems that you outraise. But also, we do have to talk about abortion. We do have to figure out when personhood is conferred. I think it's fine that you want to assign it at one day.
And
the issue is, like, I think it's Fine that I'm assigning out a different. You can disagree and you can think it's a really big problem, right? And you really want me to believe something else. What we can't do, and what happens in the abortion conversation specifically, is it's an issue of grave import. It really matters, but nobody is able to step away from the preconditions to actually gauge with the substance of what we can know, at least theoretically or empirically, and try to find an answer. That they just keep fighting each other on either side, and we just have terrible abortion policy instead. What I'd prefer is a world where we actually do engage. We do as much as we can to reduce abortion. Universal healthcare, I think, is a really big one, honestly. I suspect that's one of the biggest reasons Canada has lower, because birth isn't terrifying to me. I know as a Canadian immigrant, it's so weird to think about. When I get pregnant, I'm probably going to go home to give birth to them, because I don't know if I want a $40,000 bill. That's a crazy world to conceive of. I can't even imagine trying to think about pregnancy in America, where I know that if I have any complicated pregnancy, I'm just in permanent debt.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in lowering abortion just like you are. My answers are differently than yours. And it's super fair that you disagree with me.
But the problem is,
but I wouldn't
would
point
say,
at you and say, you're immoral for your position. I'd say, I think your answers are unsatisfying to me. And I think my answers have better outcomes.
I don't care if you think that my position is immoral. I think that we should start with, okay, but I do believe.
Because I don't think you hate women or something like that, like some stupid.
Yeah, I don't think most people who are for abortion like hate children.
Of course.
But I do think it is an immoral position to hold that it is acceptable to end the lives of children just because they're very young.
Just because children, but that's begging the question that they're children that we look at and
end the lives of human beings because they're very young. Biological human beings, members of the human. I can phrase it that way, and it's totally objective. But biology doesn't confer morality. There's nothing about it being a novel human cell that makes it morally valuable. It is because as human beings, we recognize, like if you are lost in the wilderness with your pet pig and your 2-year-old son, we recognize that it's totally normal to feed the pig to your son and monstrous to feed your son to the pig, even if he's your prize-winning pig. And why? Even if the pig was smart, he's like this genius pig that does the puzzle games and things like that, wins the blue ribbon at the county fair. It's because human beings matter. And we just, as a society, just assume biology matters here.
So is a human brain organoid a human being?
If it satisfies the definition of an organism, it may very well be. It does
satisfy the definition of an organism.
Fine, but it doesn't exist yet, right?
Well, the only reason it doesn't exist is because we won't make it, not because it can't exist.
We don't know if we can make it.
Well, we definitely know we can build all of the neurological structures, which would be an interesting, probably unethical, but an interesting test of my theory of whether consciousness is sufficient. Because it's possible that this thing would even have consciousness, and every human being would engage with it and go, fine. That ain't a human.
I am fine.
Right?
But here's the thing. Your position is going to be just as difficult if you're saying that
both positions are difficult.
Mine is just much less difficult. No. I'm putting it in species membership for what an organism is, not a property that is shared by other animals and some humans don't have, which is consciousness.
I think almost everyone is just rejecting that. Like, we don't even know what consciousness is, let alone to insist that other non-human
Then it's probably a bad
it.
criteria for determining personhood if you don't know what it is, but we do know what organismal species membership is.
I would say that the novel DNA is also a really weak criteria for how
I said being a human organism.
Yeah, novel DNA, because obviously you don't care about my left hand being chopped off.
Because it's not an organism.
Yeah, well, imagine that it grew legs and could run around. We probably wouldn't care about it.
Yeah, and imagine that there's a space elevator. If you put seashells in it, they become conscious on their way to Mars. That's a real example in philosophy.
I know.
And you can think of these kind of crazy examples, but they don't apply. They're not helpful if we're dealing with things that are actually happening
They
now.
are helpful because they help us understand why we reason with what we do. Otherwise, all we're doing is saying, essentially, if we're not willing to engage in philosophy and hypotheticals to test our logic, what we're really saying is logic and reason never mattered at all. Mm-hmm. It's just stuff we dress up, what is essentially our preference.
Well, on the trolley, are you going to save 2 non-human animals that have more consciousness than a human being?
No, because I don't think that they're ensouled. I think consciousness of human beings is the closest thing we have to ensoulment, that I can evidence it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how, and there's the reason the non-human animals are not ensouled, even though they exhibit conscious behavior, is just a religious conviction?
Yeah, it's dogma.
Okay, so you want to have abortion policy reflect your dogma?
No. I actually want it to reflect the outcomes, right? Not just my dogma. And I've already said, just to be clear, you're allowed to start at your dogma. You can't end there.
Because where I am starting with abortion, I'm starting with a secular dogma.
I think I think that's dishonest. I think you're starting.
No, it's not.
Well, I think if we're being honest, both of us are concerned about abortion because of our Christian ethics and our Christian faith.
No, there are many
Really?
there are many non-religious people who are against abortion.
I agree, but that's not what we're talking about. It's obvious for me, probably the main reason why I have a predilection against abortion is because I'm Christian, right? The issue is that then I also look at policy and outcomes, and I use logic and rationality to go, what are the ways in which we reduce harm, all of these tragedies, as much as possible in society, and outlawing abortion based on the outcomes of it right now isn't it. But if we can amend for that, if you can create a state where universal healthcare takes away half of those issues, then I'm much more amenable to these things because my policy on it is both driven by my personal ethical system, but then it is reinforced by practical logic.
And my principle is that harm is not just pain or suffering. So depriving a human being of their life, ending
future.
the existence of a human being, that is extremely harmful. It's the most valuable thing that they could have. But anyways, is there
Sure,
other,
I just
were there
read that
other,
was the ultimate
we've been
harm.
on abortion a lot. And I think both of our positions are pretty clear on that.
Yeah.
I could pull back up the.
what are-
the
Well, we're-
remaining
we're
comments.
getting
And
towards
also
3
it is
hours.
the 3
Oh,
hour.
yeah, you wanted
It is
to-
the 3 hour.
Well, was there any,
I'm going to need food and stuff.
yeah,
to
was there
keep going.
anything else you wanted to, there was some other, I agree. I think the position I'm arguing for, you might call it soft Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
But I still think it's one that many people, the thing is, would you agree? What I've articulated here, and we didn't get into the stuff about marriage, maybe we'll have to do that for another thing, but I want the state to outlaw abortion. I would want it to be involved in keeping sex sacred, so that would involve like restricting pornography as much as possible. And the things that I've argued for, do you think a lot of people would consider me and like Andrew Wilson both equally Christian nationalists?
I would hope not. I think that would be, I will say, I guess, to my atheist liberal friends, if you treat Trent as Christian the same way that you treat Andrew Wilson,
You mean as a Christian nationalist?
well, I would say they treat Christians just kind of with a blanket thing. But
Sure.
as a
No, that's
Christian
fair.
nationalist as well.
Or you mean as a Christian?
If
Like
you
all
treat
Christians
these-
are the same?
Yeah, if you treat these two individuals, one who wants to repeal the 19th and one who's like, come on, guys, let's make abortion legal, the same, I think that they're just being bad thinkers, obviously. I don't think that's a sound thing to do.
And I agree that-
However,
yeah.
your contraception position, I go, good luck trying to sell that one, right? I think the only way you sell it is through the church. And again, my only standard for what Christians can't do is make policy where their justification fundamentally comes down to, well, God said it so, which is why gay marriage, for example, I'd have huge issue with you outlawing.
When it comes to gay, here's my compromise on that. I think husbands and wives, men and women in marriage, the state has an interest in keeping them together, even if they want to come apart, because marriage makes people and people make society. Anybody else, I would just say, look, we could have legal households. You don't have to be in a sexual relationship to get benefits.
I would basically look to gay men, most of which are atheists, and go, well, you got to do what God says. I would just never do that. I think that that's silly. And I think the main reason why you would argue against a monogamous union between two men is because God thinks being gay is icky.
What I would say is that when I use principled reason, I'm not going to get into this because my other stuff gets throttled when I talk about this. When you accept the morality of non-procreative sex, it becomes very difficult to draw a boundary when it's disordered and wrong.
So the difficulty of driving a boundary is not a sufficient argument for saying, so the boundary must be as maximally conservative as possible. It can be maximally conservative for you as an individual, but that's not how state runs. And frankly, that's not how people work by and large, right? Because that same argument of non-procreative sex
I'm
bans
I'm not saying even about necessarily bringing back sodomy laws. They were
right.
They weren't.
It also
they
bans
were
masturbation potentially.
Right. Well, they were enforced sparing. It's difficult to enforce all these things. Remember what I said. Evil has to rise to a certain gravity for the state to step in. And there's a lot of sexual evil that's not going to get to that point. I'm more apt to do something about fornication than sodomy because I don't want kids being created who end up being abused or aborted. So I actually have more of a axe to grind in that area of things.
And I think
or
that you
adultery.
should use your free speech to make those cases. But if you start insisting on it at a national level, only through God says it's bad, I'm going to oppose
That's fine.
you
But here's the thing. With contraception, any of these laws that pass, like when it comes to the Christian nationalism debate, I'm a realist. The only way I'm going to get these principles passed in the law is if I get a supermajority of people who agree with me. Because when I try to do them, they're at the mercy. If the majority of people disagree with the law I passed on abortion, there is going to be a change through the ballot box or the bullet box.
Right. But ideally, policy is not just consensus, but empirics. It's not just you've convinced everyone sufficiently that gay people are gross and bad and stinky and we shouldn't let them have sex with each other. It's actually that you've evidenced that being gay is bad.
I'm not talking about a law about people, and I wouldn't put it as gay people. I might make a law saying that sodomitical acts are unhealthy, for example.
But illegal?
And not necessarily even a law. We could just, say, hey, as a health campaign, this is, just as when you smoke cigarettes, it's bad for your lungs. When you engage in anal sex, it's not great for your anus.
The issue is like most empirics are going to basically point out that there's like most anal sex is probably fine by and large. It's not that big of a deal. It doesn't mostly, like, the things that cause anal cancer with it seems to be about like friction that can cause like any type of cancer. Like the arguments for it. Well, the issue is I don't want to get into the anal sex a ton, but like the thing that you're
you and a lot of women.
The campaign that the anal sex issue is going to run into is empirics, and I think that that's good. I want the state to basically have moral issues with outcomes that they're concerned about, and then they also use things like analysis.
But like with marriage,
logic.
we have to have a principled boundary on that, because then it becomes, well, why not, polygamous marriage? Why not?
At a state level, it's like a spiritual marriage is not the same thing as a civil union. I get that the state is like taking these two things apart, but I have no interest in banning like Hindu people necessarily from certain like acts. Because again, I'm not interested at a state level to hold people to Christian standards just because Christians don't like these things. I only care about outcomes. So if in polygamous relationships, what we see is it's really bad in all of its outcomes, I'd be like, yeah, sure. More likely what it is tax issues, right? We don't want to just like let anyone marry infinite amounts of people, because then people can band together and kind of cheat the tax system.
My point though is, and I think people can see this, that on one of the main things that Christians want to make society just and proper and ordered, I do think they are rooted in natural law. That I could talk, and if you watch a lot of these debates that I have with people, it's funny when I debate even like sexual ethics, the issue of abortion, I find many times it's my interlocutor who brings up religion and I don't. And so I think that that's a sign that it's rooted in reason, and people can see, it would make sense for the state to have a law that would intervene and would put towards that.
But it's just also logically possible that God has certain things that he calls Christians to do that don't have any logic to them, such as having faith in an unfalsifiable God, that he calls us to do because we should be set apart. And I think that those are the types of things that we don't always know, which are set apart.
He calls us to do things that are illogical?
Unempirical, at least.
Well, yeah, he calls me to believe, like, I believe that heaven exists, and I have... The best evidence I have for heaven is there was a guy who walked out of his tomb 2,000 years ago and says it's there. I have good evidence he walked out of his tomb, claim. I think there's good evidence he did that, so I'm going to go with what he said on that.
Sure,
but there's other things where we can operate with important first principles and see, well, I guess what I said earlier is like we need to have good ethical systems behind the law. You think Christian ethical systems are the best? Christian ethics.
Yeah. Principles.
So we should apply principles. Christian ethics to laws, provided we don't...
You can ground them in practical logic.
Yeah.
But again, you actually have to ground them.
I was going to add...
I just want to make it clear. I think a lot of Christians will hear this and go, I can find one reason to justify gay people being bad. Not one reason. You can't find one logical, empirical reason and then be like, it done. It actually has to be a dialogue of empirics and theoretical to see if your argument holds meat against the opposing argument. And I would say, in the case of gay marriage, it doesn't hold weight. That's why we've had to disregard it. And as a Christian, you need to be honest enough with yourself to go, yeah, there isn't super good practical logic for this. The gay stuff does kind of come down to my faith. So either you have to decide, well, I need to keep researching and try to find this thing, or you maybe go, maybe this is something that God is calling us to do, but isn't calling non-Christians.
No, and I would disagree. I would recommend our listeners, there's a great book by Ryan Anderson called Truth Overruled that discussed this. He also had a great paper on this issue several years ago with Robert George and Sharif Gerges, that when you redefine marriage, you have a difficulty there in marriage existing as a social institution to provide things like maintaining monogamous, exclusive, ideally lifelong, civilly recognized relationships.
Sure, and there's a whole bunch of other scholars that vehemently disagree with them, including our state.
That's fine.
We're coming up here on the 3-hour mark. Here's what we'll do.
How do you want to wrap it up?
I mean, if you guys want to keep going, but it seems like Kyla wants to.
I'm fine with you keeping the hard.
So here's what we'll do. We have 2 chats coming through. What I'm also going to do, if anybody wants to get in a question or a comment here at the end, I'm going to lower the read threshold to just $50 if like kind of a outgoing read if you want to do.
Cheaper insults in.
And no, they'll be nice. So
I'm sure
reminder, $10 display, $50 read.
How much money you want to put that they'll be nice?
How much money do I want to
Wait,
put?
have you seen them all yet? Yeah.
Huh?
Will you give me $50 if there's at least how many super chats are coming up?
Well, we have 2 coming in, but I'm not inclined.
Will you give me $50 if at least one of them insults
money,
me?
You know, look, I'm a starving college student. All my money,
with your how many million subscribers?
You know, I'm a starving artist. All my money is actually tied up in prediction markets for the upcoming UFC fight, Kamzat versus Strickland. So it's
I'll
all
let
tied
you
up
off the
there.
hook, but I understand.
Thank you, Kyla. Thank you, Kyla. But we do have these super chats. These are below the threshold. But reminder, guys, if you want to get your message read, $50 and up. Before I let them come through, really quick, guys, if you enjoyed the debate, like the video if you'd like to see more debates. Also, Nathan, pull up Twitch really quick. Guys, as we end this, wind down the stream, if you guys can, if you're watching over there on Twitch, drop us a quick follow. And if you have a Prime sub available, if you have Amazon Prime, you can link it to your Twitch. Quick for easy way to support the show every single month. All right, we have Desert Jorge coming in. There it is. I wish this.
Oh, I get $50.
Hey, I didn't agree with it. I agree with that.
How did I know? I'm so smart.
Erudite.
I don't know if you can't spell if you get to call people retarded. Just saying.
I like that.
Would let Trent finish his points. He's done it to her, but far less often. Listen to understand, whether than to respond. She loses credibility.
I think you are an extremely small person if interruptions scare you that much. It's fine. They're like all that happens is both people go, "Hey, can you not interrupt me as much?" and then they respect it. Interruptions are actually what make debates way better, because if people just like monologue at each other endlessly, they're really boring.
Yeah, I think
debates.
this was fine. We made our points.
It was. We have Flavius. Destiny's Orbiter, cry harder.
Did that guy give 200 before also?
He did. It's the same guy. You have no moral grounding. It's solely based on the current zeitgeist.
Read it slower. He's so close. He's so close.
Hold on.
Oh, he's so close. Keep going. Just a little slower, though.
What do you...
That's what he's doing.
What were you...
Because that's what he's doing.
Okay.
Keep going. Read it slowly, though, and with a deep voice.
The fuck? Is my voice not deep enough as it is, I guess?
Just extra slow.
I got to pull it back up again because you distracted me.
He'll love that. He's close, though.
Okay, get your mind out of the gutter, Kyla. Get your mind out of the gutter. All right. You're as materialistic as the next modern feminist. Go back to Canada. You know what? It's a bit... maybe direct. You guys want to talk some shit towards me? Maybe throw a little something in Trent's direction. Just I feel Kyla feels
don't prove me right, guys. Don't prove me right.
Kyla feels a little. She's getting.
I don't feel any way.
Yeah,
I just think being proven
Trent,
right.
you were a loser, and I hated you in Whiplash.
Incredibly satisfying.
I do
All
get.
right,
Miles
so those
Teller.
Were you in Whiplash?
Those
no,
are the
people say I
messages.
look like.
You do look like the guy
from Miles
What's
Teller.
His name?
Miles Teller.
Yes.
Okay.
Final reminder here, guys, as they give their closing statements. If you want to, just as we're winding down, we're going to lower the threshold to a $50 read, $49.99 read. If any of those come in, we'll get to those after the respective closing statements. Trent, you go first with your closing statement.
I don't know. It's going to be an informal one. And I
do a handshake.
I appreciated the conversation, and I think we need to have more like this to get closer to truth, because we're coming together. I think it's not helpful. I wanted to comment on that last comment because it's like, oh, you're just a totally relativistic materialist, and it's like, that's not your position. And so if we as Christians say, oh, everybody who disagrees with me is just a godless materialist, total relativist, subjectivist, utilitarian, well, we're not going to make headway. Some people think that. You don't think that. There's other people who think differently. Mm-hmm. You have a particular objective framework. Now, I don't think that it explains many things we consider to be certainly immoral. I don't think it is the best framework for understanding right and wrong and what should be legal or illegal. And I've tried to show that by giving examples and talking with you. And that's why I would encourage others that is, if we want to have a Christian nation, the way to get there, we used to be 80, 90, 95% Christian. It's gone to about 62% identify as Christian. That's leveled off. And I think there's a bit of an uptick because people see how the world can be irrational when you leave the natural law that God gave. I appreciate you see that God made the world and we can look to him to figure out how it should work. I just think you're mistaken on something. You're right about some ways he wants the world to work. You're mistaken about other ways. And so I would very much like to use reason to help you and others to see that. And I would encourage anyone listening. I've done a lot more work in these moral issues to help see how they are, not just something you read out of the Bible, but it's something we can know through reason, that sex is sacred and has a certain end. Human beings have value regardless of their age or their functional ability, and they should be protected under the law. And I think a true Christian nation would be one everybody would want to live in because it would be just, equitable, and there would be human flourishing because that's what God wants for us.
Okay, Kyla, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you've basically agreed with me that the Christian nationalism that I think I and many of my ilk are concerned about is specifically a type of nationalism in which Christians go, well, my God said it so I'm going to make it so for everyone else. And I think you and I have agreed that's bad. That's the wrong thing to do. It's not what the founding fathers wanted at all. And the merging of church and state does this strange thing where you have Christian leaders who will necessarily, have to be infallible because they get to decide what type of Christianity, right? We want a nation of pluralism, right? It was one of the most good things that the founding fathers did when they said, we're not going to have a national religion because we want to respect everyone's capacity to have their own conscience, because the state should not require belief. The state should make for a good nation state, and that's it. And that includes both morally, but also practically. And all of these things have to be balanced. And I think that's why it's hard to be a leader as a Christian in a political sense, is because you're constantly having to juggle these practical arguments for things and things that you might take as moral issue. I wish we had gotten into evangelical Protestant bashing together a little bit more. I think that we would have a lot of grounds on that, because I very much view fundamentalist Christian Protestantism as a heretical faith that has created a golden calf called republicanism, and it is destroying the church. It's bad for the nation, but it is destroying the church. The amount of people that hate Christians is sad. And they hate Christians for good reasons. Not always good reasons, but a lot of good reasons, because Christians are nasty. Because all these Christian viewers that are Andrew Wilsons are going to be in my DMs wishing me death threats. Whichever fan of his is sending me fake AI porn of me being like essayed and stuff. Gross, right? And so we have this disgusting behavior of people putting their hatred, their bigotry, and their politics before God. And it's really sad to see. And I think that American Christian nationalism is that. And I guess I'm a little concerned that Trent will walk away from this debate getting in trouble for me praising him and appreciating him, because
From who?
From hateful Christians.
Look, I've been in their bullseye for a while now.
I know.
And what matters to me is just doing the right thing. And it used to be, it was people who were not Christian that would get the most mad at me. But in the past few years, the people who were just the most vicious towards me and my family, spreading lies about us, horrible things. It is a strange form of Christianity. Paul writes in his letter to Timothy, those who claim to the form of religion but deny its power. They like a Christian costume. Yeah. But they, to me, they're no different. Someone who would go online and claim to be a Christian and send you death threats and pornography of you is no different than, someone who wears a cross who goes and does hardcore pornography. It's like you are wearing your Christianity as a costume at this point, when God wants us to be convicted. And the thing that makes Christianity great is, the greatest teaching, I think, is this. It has been said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. But I like that we're not enemies. We disagree.
Put your hot coals on your enemy. What that actually means, when you look at the original text of hot coals, that's saying give your fire to even your own.
And here's the thing. I have hope. I'll get you to come around. We just got to talk a bit more.
Tell you what, if the Pope excommunicates JD Vance, I'll convert like that. I'm just kidding, not actually, but it would be pretty based. Gotta say, be kind of awesome.
Be careful what we'll see what happens.
Look, if that happens, there's a lot of things the Catholic Church does really well. I'm still protesting it for a couple of reasons, but I definitely appreciate that you do not dress up your hatred as God, because man, it feels good when your hate is God justified, but
Of
it's
course.
very, very dangerous.
The greatest evils aren't lust. Hate is more likely to kill your heart. But no, I have hope, and for those who are on the fence too, a lot of people are on the fence. My hope is to present reason, to pray for them, and let the Holy Spirit take it from there. So, and the conversation you and I, it'll continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, I want to thank both of you guys for joining me today. Thank you guys for doing this debate. Appreciate it. And we are going to be live to the viewers. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to be live again Sunday, 5 p.m. Pacific, with a dating talk episode. Should be a good one. So yeah, let me see if there's any chats no chats. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys again for tuning in. Thank you, Kyla. Thank you, Trent. Appreciate it, guys. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you Sunday. Good night.